was a real friend to the Native Americans, and this was a love letter for them and to them. And who was Crazy Horse's? Was it Sitting Bear? Maybe I forget, but he had all of the he had enough blessings of the requisite players to embark on this thing.
Well, I think anytime you have this thing, controversy. Well, you're gonna have people that don't like it, that do like it. Yeah, there's
for sure.
What you do.
But the difference, I mean, for me, I called when we brought Dirty Chops back during the lockdowns because I just felt like I wanted to be the first show back on the TV, that was shooting, and this was one of the first things that we did. But I started by calling Rushmore, and I'm not telling you the story to make anybody sound bad, but it really just was kind of appalling. I said, look, I want to bring my crew, and I want to tend to this statue, this statuary, this monument. At the time, the headlines were filled with statues being pulled down and being disrespected for any number of reasons, right?
Right.
I'm like, look, I think the Park Service does an amazing duty. And I want to meet the caretakers of our statuary, right. And I would love, to work on this with the people who work on it. And they not only said no, they were like, yeah, are you crazy? We would never permit anything like that. Like, I think they thought it was exploitative somehow. I'm like, I want America to learn the story of Rushmore. I want them to learn something about the people memorialized on it. I want them to meet the people who care for it. It's just a love letter to one of our monuments. But it was a hard no. And I really wanted to go to that part of the country. And so I knew Crazy Horse was nearby. And the answer was, oh, yeah, come on out anytime. And the difference, of course, was Crazy Horse isn't being built with a penny of federal money. It has no federal oversight. It's very personal to this family, and the people who are still in charge of it are true custodians of it. It's really interesting when you talk to people who are in charge of a thing that means a lot to other people.
Monumental in reality.
Monumental monuments.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's some people I think see it as a burden, some as a challenge, some as an obligation. But for me, the vast majority of Americans are never going to see either one of those monuments in person. So to show them. But more people will have just seen what Jamie put up here as a result of this, probably, than will visit in person. And that's amazing.
Yeah, that is amazing.
When you think about a couple of guys smoking cigars and sipping a coffee and just passing the time, and all of a sudden you're able to learn about the way they drew lots and the way where we got our energy from just a little while ago. Mm-hmm. This Buffalo Roundup I was telling you about. I mean, there were only a couple thousand of them. And when you think about the accounts of the day, like where the buffalo roam was as far as you could see, just thick.
Do you know Dan Flores? Do you know who he is?
Tell me.
He wrote American Coyote, and he wrote, what is it, Buffalo Diplomacy, Buffalo Ecology? I forget, but the buffalo premise is very fascinating because the numbers of buffalo, he believes, but they were in such large numbers because so many Native Americans died out because of diseases. So the Native Americans follow the buffalo, hunt them, and kill them. It takes a long time for gestation for a buffalo. So when the buffalo have new buffalo, it's a long time to repopulate. But if the Native Americans, 90% of them were wiped out by disease when the settlers came here. So there's no one hunting them for a long time. And so the populations grew immense. And so this was not something that was reported when the first settlers got here. When the first Europeans came to North America and made their way across the country, never did they describe massive herds of buffalo. It wasn't a thing. It wasn't a thing until after the Native American population had been decimated by disease, and then the buffalo flourished and became overpopulated, in a sense, an unnatural population. Because they didn't have to worry about wolves, they didn't have to worry. So when they first were here, right? Buffalo existed far back before there was a mass extinction of like 65% of North American mammals that coincided with the end of the Ice Age. Probably had to do with the Younger Dryas impact, which is a theory
The
about.
Cambrian thing? Or
It's like 11. Well, there's two different time periods that they attribute to. There's a shower, an asteroid shower. If you really want to get into this, you should really look up Younger Dryas impact theory online. And then there's a guy named Randall Carlson who's kind of dedicated his life to showing that this is probably what ended the Ice Age. There's a bunch of science behind it in terms of like core samples and stuff they do that shows that there's asteroid impacts that happened all over the world during this particular time period. And he thinks that coincided with the extinction of the mammal, the American lion, a lot of different animals that just died off. 65% of North American mammals died off during this time. And you got to think, like, when the buffalo existed back then, they existed with the North American lion, which was bigger than the African, the biggest lion ever. So they're getting jacked by these massive predators. And then you have this extinction event, and then you have humans start hunting. And so humans, now horses have been reintroduced to North America by Europeans. Humans are on these horses, and then they're hunting these animals. Reintroduced, by the way, because the horses originated in North America, including zebras. All horse species came from here, but that was the Bering Land Bridge, and things moved around. And when the mass extinction event happened, it killed off all the horses here. But then those horses over there that they kind of extirpated from America, brought them back in. And now Native Americans have horses. And so they are really effective in hunting buffalo. They get the numbers down to a number where when people are making their way across the country, they're not seeing them everywhere. And then you have this mass event where 90% of Native Americans die. Then you have millions of buffalo. This is what Dan Flores writes about. It's really interesting.
1830, 40?
You have to go to whatever it's called.
Yeah. Here's the tragedy for me. I narrated a special about one. I can't remember it.
Really?
I mean, I remember enough of it to know that I narrated. That's what I told you 3 hours ago.
Is that the Ken Burns one? Is that what you
could have been? Could have been. I know if it was Ken Burns, he always hires Peter Coyote.
Oh,
Peter does all this stuff.
He's great. Yeah.
But that's what I meant earlier when I'm like, I feel. I don't think there's anything wrong with me yet, but my bucket's full too, and it's so annoying. Like I was talking to a friend of mine just yesterday about how the universe works, which is a show I've been narrating for the Science Channel literally for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he knows all of the information in the show, but he thinks because he heard me tell it to him that I know it too, but I don't. I'm just adjacent to it.
Right.
I know just enough to keep a conversation on its feet, but it's like it's this constant thing that I'm older than I've ever been, and it's just nagging at me now because it's like, God damn it, I should know. I should remember more that I should have remembered more about Philbrick. I should have remembered more about.
I don't think there's a design.
I don't.
And I think humans like yourself, this is kind of a new thing. Like in terms of human history, people that are exposed to so many different things, so many different topics, so many different experts, so many different timelines and stories that you're dealing with. It's essentially a new thing with human beings. You know what Dunbar's number is? Dunbar's number is the number of people that you can keep in your mind,
Sure.
memory. Yeah. That's essentially born out of necessity and tribal life, right? So we essentially have the same brains, the same capacity, the same hard drive as people who lived in tribes 10,000 years ago. Yeah. But we're still stuck with this hard drive, with this world that has an endless supply of information. It's consistently bombarding you with new facts.
I read that like Bill Clinton's number was way high. Like certain people's numbers,
who they can keep in their head,
like the number of people you can keep.
It probably expands just like the part of your brain expands when you do difficult things. It probably expands.
There's a podcast, as you know, dedicated to what happened on your podcast.
I don't even know.
Yeah. There's a podcast out there basically called Experience. I don't know what it's called, Experiencing the Joe Rogan Experience or something. Because there's too much information on your show. Right? There's just too much. And people who love it get anxious because they can't process all of it. And so, like, there's an ecosystem. In other words, there's a docent, to bring it back to art. This is what we need, I think, more than anything today. We need somebody, like if you're going to go to an art museum, you need somebody to lead you through. I do, anyway. Somebody who can.
It helps.
It helps. If you're going to go see, if you're going to go see a martial arts fight for the first time, if you're going to go to the octagon, it'd be better to sit next to you than me, right?
Sure.
So everybody.
But you'd be annoying. I have to say you know. Okay. How much do you know why that hurts?
Here, let me show you. Can you feel that? I'm just saying that I think more than ever before, people need a guide. They need somebody to make sense out of all the information, because I don't think there's not much new information. It's just accessible nowadays.
There's new information too.
How similar?
Because information is acquired upon the consumption of all the other information. Like it's all exponential, piles on top of each other. It's not just now we know because of the new information, or because of the information that we require. Now we have a new understanding. So that's new information. You know, nutrition. There's constantly new information. Nutrition. How's that possible? It can be forever. Because now we know more about it. So it is new information.
Well, there's no such thing as an old joke if you hear it for the first time.
Right.
So if I just learned that vitamin D is important, but better assimilated with magnesium and K2, I might say that's some new information. But you would go, no, dude, that's old information. You're just learning it.
Right, but it's fairly new anyway, because nutritional science has really only been around for, 100 plus years? And the understanding of it today is far greater than in any other time in our life. Because of guys like Huberman, because of these different scientists that have dedicated themselves to educating people about nutrition, the process that your body goes through and absorbs nutrients, and what enhances that, with enzymes, different things you need.
So let me say it this way then. There's a body of information that exists that I don't know. And then there's a body of new information that I also don't know because it's new.
Right.
And the body of the stuff that I don't know yet, that's been around forever, is massive.
Massive.
The new stuff is new. And I don't know how big it is, but it's not as big as this incredible repository of stuff. Like when I walk in a library, look at all that stuff. Look at this cursed thing here in my hand and say, oh my God, if I have an internet connection, I have access to 98% of everything that we've ever known.
Yeah.
Now, that either makes you intensely curious or intensely uneasy, because now you know all. Maybe. But you have it now. Like if you're not, like, what are you doing? You're sitting on the toilet. Are you reeling? Are you TikToking? Like, how are you spending one truly finite resource you have? Right. What are you doing?
Like, a lot of us get distracted. Yeah.
But there's stories, they're buffalo stories and whale stories that are out there.
I think that's why people like your shows. You know, I think that's why people like podcasts. I think that's why people were interested in documentaries. There's still people out there that are interested in being curious.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yes, Joe, it is.
That's what we've done.
It's a pleasant living.
Listen, man, it's been awesome talking to you. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
You know what?
3 hours just fucking flew by.
Full disclosure, I'm kind of relieved. I was getting so annoyed with friends of mine. I'm like, hey, why didn't you go to the show? What's, like, maybe. My mother said maybe he's not that into you.
It's just a time thing. There's a lot of people out there. But I really did want to talk to you.
I'll show you a truck before we go.
Sure.
Because I know you're a car guy.
Yeah.
So this company called Sugar Creek up in Ohio made me a truck.
Ooh.
Right?
What kind?
Well, it started as a 1964 Dodge Powerback. It ended up as this.
Dude, I've seen that online. That's yours.
That's mine.
Oh, that's crazy. I love those old Power Wagons. Dude, that thing was incredible. What a great job they did on that.
It's unbelievable. 27. It's about 9,000 man hours.
Oh my god, that thing was fucking incredible. Oh, you got a Elephant engine in it.
1,100 horsepower.
My goodness, look at that. So it's got a TRX hood.
It's
Wow.
You will be.
That's fucking great.
I know.
Oh, did you drive that?
Barrett Jackson is going to auction it off
No.
in January.
Why? Don't keep it.
Because my foundation needs money. And right, so it's going to get I don't know what it'll go for. He says a bunch, but
that'll go for a lot of money.
Yeah,
that's probably going to go for $2 million. $2 million?
Probably cost $500,000.
Wow,
beats me. This is another one of those worlds.
Maybe auctions are crazy because a bunch of rich guys get in there and go, "I want it," and then they start feeding up to. Look at this fucking. That's incredible. $2 million.
Well, who knows? But I went up to Columbus to see the garage where they make this thing, and you need to put this on your list of stuff to do when your bucket's not overflowing, because a guy called John Richardson, who owns the biggest bacon factory in the country, Sugar Creek, is crazy automotive freak. And he built this giant garage. He hired 27 savants, and all they do is take classic cars from his sort of quasi junkyard and turn it into these gems.
Oh wow!
So he built this for me, and Barrett Jackson said, "Yeah, we'll auction it off." So I went up there with my crew just to look at it. Dude, these guys, man, it's what we're. It's
I would never be able to let that thing go.
It's the art we were talking about.
Yeah.
That's art.
That's art. Yeah. Oh, 100%. That's art. Yeah. Yeah. Mike, appreciate you very much, man. Thank you for being here. It was a lot of fun. All right. Bye, everybody.
I want to announce some upcoming tour dates. I'll be coming to see you with the Return of the Red Tour. October 12th in Wichita, Kansas at the Orpheum. October 13th,
get your shit
Omaha,
together.
Nebraska.
I don't understand it. I don't understand why they wouldn't just show you all the shit that they already know you like.
Hello.
Joe Rogan podcast, chicken dude.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Train my name, Joe Rogan Podcast, my name.
All day.
Gentlemen, Mr. Corsetti, how are you, sir? Very nice to meet you, by the way. Nice to meet you, too, Joe. Thank you very much for that video. We talked about it before, but I want to say it publicly. The debunking of the debunking by Flint Dibble. And you really nailed him on so many of those things that he was dishonest about. And it just, I wish we knew in real time, but unfortunately, it takes a lot of research to be able to figure out what he was telling the truth about and what he wasn't.
Yeah.
Rabbi, thank you. I was, tell everybody your site too. Debunking the past. That was my email, debunking on YouTube or on Twitter. That's with 2 D's like my ex. Not debunking.
Keep this.
Sorry. That's a great.
Sorry. De-dunking, not debunking.
Yes.
Dan Richards.
De-dunking. Dan Richards. Thank you. The thing with Fred, it was actually funny. The moment that I knew that he was lying about the science was when you asked him about the fertilization of plants. That's what they roll back and no longer domesticated. He was, it just takes out through the years. No, I've researched this and I know better. And he was just knee-jerking straight up over thousands of years. And when you pressed him, he's like, well, I don't know for sure. Well, that's a bummer because that's his field of study, which is really kind of crazy. It's a really fascinating thing that seeds do adapt to agriculture. They adapt to the fact that it's better for the survival of the plant if one you develop agriculture, if they're more robust and they stay on the plant, it's better for the wild. If they break off easy and they can scatter better and you can, proliferate.
Yeah, it's really basic if you think about it. I mean, if it stays on the plant after it's ripe, it's just sitting there waiting for the person to come along and eat it.
But that whole natural selection thing when it comes to plants is so fascinating. But the question is so simple. If you stopped having agriculture and these plants just grew wild, would they go back to the same characteristics of wild plants? And he was like, no, there's no evidence of that. But then I saw your video, and then I looked at some other stuff, and there's quite a bit of evidence of this, particularly with wild rice, right?
Yeah, particularly with wild rice. Yes, there's that one. It looks like out of many of them, but there's a possibility that one was domesticated and then went back to the wild and then was domesticated again. It would be rice. So that shows multiple types. There's different ways the seeds can break off, right? They can break in different points of the plant, or they can just fall straight out. And rice shows numerous pathways, where wheat only has one genetic pathway to that seed shatter where the seed falls off. So it's they get pretty complicated, but rice does have a lot of genetic possibilities for that. Now, I'm not a geneticist, so I'm sure that somebody's going to come and say that it's a pseudo crap. But ultimately, at the end of the day, Clint was treating it as a debate, whereas you and Graham were both trying to sift to the truth. And that's why he was not going to give Graham one little corner, one little shred of possibility of being right anywhere, when in reality, it's a lot of, just like everything else in life, it's a lot of gray.
Well, it's also this whole subject of the past it's so obviously confusing. Because when you look at, I watched your video today, the Baalbek video, just looking at the enormous size of those stones, there's no reasonable explanation how people, like, what is that date to? Like, what year do they believe it was made?
This is where it gets fun, is because they credit it to the Romans and the Phoenicians. However, it goes beyond the sophistication and the capabilities what the Romans were known to have, whether it's the existence of the screw jack for lifting the stones. But Baalbek, which is located in Lebanon, and I had the great privilege of going there in September of last year, exactly 1 month before things kicked off in Israel with the whole Hamas thing. And if I hadn't got there then, I wouldn't have no chance. Like right now, Israel's bombing Lebanon. And so it's a dangerous place. But Baalbek, if there was one example, one ancient site on Earth that is evidence of a lost, ancient, advanced civilization, and by advanced, I'm not talking about space lasers here. I'm talking about more sophisticated than what we were taught in school for the known capabilities. And Baalbek has the largest stones that were ever quarried in human history, the largest stones that were lifted, stacked, and transported in human history, and the largest stone columns in all of classical history. And we're talking, so the trilithon stones, 3 stones, 900 tons apiece, or 800 metric tons, and they were moved a half mile from the quarry. They were lifted and stacked approximately 30 feet off the ground. And when I say stacked, they were perfectly lined up. And Jamie, it's in my folder of Baalbek if you want to show some of these. And they're absolutely massive. So let me tell you right here, and I, of course, have the gentleman there who I'll tell you about later highlighted just to kind of show you for perspective. Like that's someone right there, it's 5'11". Those stones that are highlighted in red are the trilithon stones. But these pictures do not do it justice because it's taken through an ultra-wide camera lens. From the top to bottom of the red highlighted stones is 14 feet. And they're 62 feet long. Or 62 feet, excuse me. Like, there's me. And
it's hard to tell because of the perspective, and people need to kind of understand how a wide-angle lens sort of distorts things by showing you this enormous field of view. But when you're looking at something that's 14 feet long and 62 feet long and 14 feet high, what is the weight of that? What's the overall weight?
900 imperial tons or 800 metric tons. And to anyone listening, a metric ton is 2,200 pounds, 1,000 kilograms, and an imperial ton is 2,000 pounds. So that's 1.7 million pounds. Each of them, there's 3 of them. And if you were to go to the quarry, there's ones that are 1,200 tons and even 1,500 tons that are 20 feet tall. This is mind-boggling. Like, Jamie, if you want to just scroll through some of the other photos to kind of give Joe the perspective and the audience the perspective.
Those are clearly cut stones that were moved into place and moved 23 feet above the ground.
Right. And technically 30 feet because there's stones that are actually below the ground there that you can't see because it's submerged under the earth. So technically it was 30 feet, but 23 feet off the ground today. And right there, this highlights, so not only is that 14 feet from top to bottom, which you would never realize when you're looking at this, And these are confirmed measurements, by the way. This is right out of encyclopedias. But notice how they're completely flush, nice and even with each other. And this exceeds the known capabilities of what the Romans had. And it's worth mentioning this site is some 2,400 miles from Rome, the capital. And if they're going to say that this was created by the Romans, one, people need to understand that the Romans were renowned for documenting everything, yet this site is not credited to anybody. They don't know exactly who did it or when, but the academics conclude that it had to have been the Romans or the Phoenicians because, of course, there was no one before them. And with this photo right here, let me say something else. There is evidence of at least 2 or arguably 3 different architectures that were done at this site. And I would conclude that this is evidence that this site existed in prehistoric times. There's also, I could show you encyclopedias that talk about Baalbek being prehistoric in nature, dating back 11,000 years of human history. And what I argue is that it was built up, it was found by the Romans, the Phoenicians, and built upon later. And right here is evidence for all that have eyes to see. Look how they obviously used broken stones and constructed on top of it. Why would you go from making the most advanced stones in history that far exceed anything you see in Rome? For example, if you were to go to the Colosseum, as magnificent as that is, it is the architecture of mathematics and just brilliance. But this right here, why would they for all the feats of Roman history, why would they have the most impressive feats over 2,000 miles away from the capital? In fact, let me just say this. When I'm talking about 900-ton stones, the largest stone in all of Rome is 53 tons. It's the Trajan's capital block to make up the Trajan's column. 53 tons. This is 15 times heavier.
There's a number of things too. Now, I'm not a huge believer in ancient technology.
I know you've heard me talk about AG1. It's an awesome way to improve your whole body health and just feel better in general. But today I have a new special offer for you. If you try AG1, you also get a free month supply of AG's omega-3 supplement. These once-a-day capsules have high-quality omega-3 fatty acids to take with your AG1. Just that easy. Over 80% of people are not consuming the right amount of omega-3s in their diet, and AG's capsules ensure that you'll get the essential fatty acids you need. These nutrients provide additional support for brain and cardiovascular health when taken together with AG1. And if you've ever taken fish oil before, you know that taste. Well, don't worry. AG's encapsulated fish oil actually has a nice lemon taste. Not bad at all. If you're looking for a simple and effective investment in your health, try AG1. And if you've been thinking about it, try it now. This November, you'll receive a 1-month supply of AG Omega-3 when you first subscribe, in addition to the welcome kit with 5 AG1 travel packs and a bottle of vitamin D3 plus K2. So make sure you check out drinkag1.com/Joe Rogan to claim this special offer. That's drinkag1.com/Joe Rogan.
I'm not a big believer in ancient technology, as Jimmy's well aware, but
Which is why it's important that you're here, because people can hear multiple perspectives.
yeah, that's where I can tell you some things about Baalbek that are still interesting to me. One of them is you don't see the Roman foot in the stones, which is weird. You would expect to see some sort of breakdown of the Roman foot in these measurements, but they're not there at Baalbek. They are there on the stones that were quarried
By Roman foot, what you're saying is that there's a different measurement, what they considered a foot.
Yes.
It's not 12 inches.
Correct. There's a Roman unit of measurement that they would use in construction, and it's here. We don't see it in those stones in the trilithon. But there's 3 stones that were quarried and left in the ground. All of those stones show signs of using the Roman foot.
Yeah, Jamie, would you scroll over?
So that right off the bat shows to me that the ones that were installed were not built by the Romans, but the ones that were quarried were made by the Romans. They were trying to quarry out stones to match it. Another thing is Roman architecture always uses the most impressive things right in the front. You walk in the front of the thing, and that's where you're going to see the biggest stones, the most impressive, for obvious reasons. These are in the back, completely on the opposite end of the entrance. You have to, like, from what you told me, you have to look for them if you don't know where they're at, right? Like, you can't just show up on the side and say, "Here's a telephone."
Well, let me tell you a quick story real quick. So I had the pleasure of going there with some people, and I'll tell you about it later. I won't do the name drop just yet. But Dory, who lives in Lebanon, he toured us around, and he had been to the site 3 times before. When we went, it was his 4th time. He did not know of the existence of the trilithon stones. They're around back. You got to walk probably a third of a mile to get there. They don't even bring tours around to the trilithon stones. He had no idea what I was talking about. The night before dinner, I was trying to explain to him, like, the trilithon stones, the 900-ton stones. seen them before.
How do they not show the tourists this?
That's an excellent question. You do have to walk. To be honest, it's like a 12, 15-minute walk to go around to get there. I mean, it's part of the platform, but you have to go all the way around. Some people just don't feel like making the walk. And when we were there, we were totally alone for a half hour with these stones. Not a single person. There was hundreds of people at the site. Not a single one of them came around back. Now, just to clarify what the audience is seeing right now, this is at the quarry, which is a half mile away. This is where all the stones originate from. And this one right here is what's called the Stone of the Pregnant Woman. It is 1,200 tons. As you can see, it's 14 feet tall, which is the same height. So in those 12-ton stones I was showing you a moment ago, the only difference is that this one's 68 feet long. It's virtually the same size, except for just a few feet shorter, but it's the same height. So that gentleman right there, Pierre, who's a wonderful man, is 6 foot tall. And look at him just dwarfed by the stone.
100 tons.
Right.
And it's not from the
Well, it is. This was court. So this is at the quarry.
So so this one's at the quarry, but the ones that were placed, where are they from?
This quarry, which is a half mile away. So this is
So they moved 1,800,000 pounds a half a mile.
3 of them, and that doesn't include the 2 dozen that are 350 tons apiece. That doesn't include the 9 that are 600 tons apiece. 9 stones that are 600 tons apiece are somehow a side note to the trillion stones. And let me just tell you this. This is something, Jamie, if you scroll over a few to the articles involving, because this is what the audience needs to understand. A lot of people hear these numbers and they don't wrap their head around exactly how important this is, which is that people go to the article involving the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. It's in the same folder of Baalbek. And the largest stone moved in modern times is 340 tons. And we're going to come back to all these photos too, because it's extremely important with some details in here.
That's the one at that goofy museum in LA,
Yes.
which is, by the way, a very goofy museum.
Yeah, I haven't been there.
It's so dumb. It's so dumb. There's an acrylic box that's on the ground.
Yeah.
That you're supposed to interpret as art. It's just a box that's just sitting there. It's one of those places where you go there and you go, "What's my tax dollars going to?"
Jamie, go
motherfuckers.
to the other folder. It's moving stones. So let me just, while he's looking for that, let me explain to you. So
I saw the video on that. And so what this is there was a suspended stone.
Yeah.
That's an enormous stone that they placed there as part of their art piece.
yeah,
And this thing was
not that one. Not
one.
that, Jamie.
This
Go-
is just fails.
that's it. Yeah, we'll play that video in a little bit. It's pretty funny.
They had to move the stone. It was 4 miles an hour is the fastest they can move it. They had to build a structure around the stone to move it.
Yes.
And
So
this fucking insanely huge truck.
let me tell you. So the details, it is a 200. So they had to custom build a trailer truck around the stone itself.
Tell Jamie what
Jamie, look under the moving stones folder. Go to, let's see here, scroll down a little bit, go to Ramesses statue. Man, these silly, you're using a Mac, it doesn't show you the preview of the pictures. So keep looking until you find a big red truck, but I'll tell the audience while you're looking for it exactly what we're talking about here. So, yeah, keep going. Go back there. You're on it. Go back a little bit. Go back to the article 3. Go left like 3 times. Right there. Go back. Right there. So this one stone, 340 tons, they call it the largest operation of its kind since the Egyptians built the pyramids. They had to custom build a 260-foot long trailer truck that consists of 196 semi-truck wheels. It has 44 axles. It's 32 feet long. It took a year of planning. It cost $10 million. It took 9 days to move this 340-ton stone.
What a great use of taxpayers' money. $10 million. There's no way they needed that money for LA.
Yeah, who cares about potholes and homeless people?
No way. I mean, this is more important.
And so this is what's so important, is that the largest stone moved in human history is at the Ramesseum. It's the Ramesseum statue in Egypt. It's 1,000 metric tons, which is 2.2 million pounds. That was inexplicably moved 170 miles from the quarry in Aswan. And here's the significance of this. Brother, this stone at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art is 1/3 the weight. The stone at the Ramesseum is 3 times heavier.
And how far did they move that stone?
All right, this one at the museum,
the Ramesseum.
170 miles, and the other one was moved 106 miles.
170 miles.
And
it's 2 million pounds.
And so this is where things get really fun, is that they say, the academics, they say that the stones would have been moved on tree logs because that's their best guess. And it's not an unreasonable guess, but when you look into the nuanced details, so I really nerded out hard on this. There's a lot of people, are you familiar with the Mohs scale of hardness? No. So it's the measurement of stone, and it's often used by alternative ancient history buffs to say that, hey, copper-based tooling could not have been utilized to cut granite stone that's been claimed. And there's no evidence that the Egyptians never told us they used bronze tooling to cut the stones and make up the granite stones within the pyramid. And so I started asking, like, wait a second, if they're going to say that they moved a 2.2 million pound stone on tree logs, well, they say that it was the cedar, the Lebanon cedar trees. Well, I nerded out on this, and there's something called the Jenga scale of hardness, which measures the hardness of wood, and it's often used for, if you're going to pick wood flooring in your house. It's one of the softest on earth, not the softest, but it's so soft that it would never even be considered for flooring in your house because your furniture and your heels would dent it immediately. And if you were to put significant weight on it, whatever that weight is, it would either crush it, crumble it, or at least dent it out of a circle, or it being a circular nature to roll on. And so when you look into the nuanced details involving the mysterious accomplishments of the ancients, it becomes abundantly clear, like if I had one thesis, is that the true history of mankind was more advanced than what we were taught in school. Now, how advanced? That's the fun topic. We'll dive into that here in the next couple hours. But the reality is that there's evidence for all who have eyes to see that there, I mean, again, brother, 1,000 metric ton statue, and this is right out of encyclopedias.
Show the statue. So this is the statue. It somehow or another fell.
Yeah, so it was a seated statue. That's me in front of it, and it's broken into multiple pieces.
There's some images, Jamie, of what it originally looked like.
Look, so that foot, it's up to my belly button. Like the top of the foot. That's just the foot. There's another picture that an illustration that would show you what it would have looked like when it was full. There, go back one. So that's what it looks like from an aerial shot now. It's completely toppled over. God knows what would have taken to knock this thing over. They say probably an earthquake. It was a seated statue. If it was a standing statue,
that's what it looked like originally.
That's what yes. And again, 1,000 metric tons is 2.2 million pounds. How it got knocked over in itself, to me, might be indicators of some sort of cataclysm, but that's a side point. But the point is this: it was moved 170 miles. The Egyptians did not articulate, illustrate, or describe how they would have done so. And
isn't that part of the problem with like the burning of the Library of Alexandria? Is all that information was lost forever?
Yes. Here's the thing. Well, let me say this real quick, brother. The Library of Alexandria was like thousands of years before the Great Pyramid. Like the Library of Alexandria was just after, was it 47 AD or BC that it got destroyed? Is believed something around there. So 2,000 years ago. This statue is 3,000 years old, according to the academics. So this is 1,000 years before the Library of Alexandria. So yeah, it's not unreasonable to suggest that they would have had information about how they constructed these things. In fact, I want to believe that they did. It's gone. Yeah, they might not have. What were you going to say, Jim?
When you're talking about, we look at the way that they moved the stone. You're talking about the cedar. They moved one stone in human history that was really big. The biggest stone ever moved was a thunderstone. It was moved by Catherine the Great's people.
Late 1700s.
Late 1700s. They used a big team of people, and they moved this thing not very far, like 10 miles, 8 miles, something like that.
9 miles, and it took 9 months.
And when they were pulling this thing on the ground, they had to consistently try metallurgy, different types of ball bearings for it to roll on, because the ones they were moving would keep from being crushed. And they had to use screw jacks that are just like you jack up a house floor with, or something. They would use these screw jacks to lift the statue back up and put it on bearings. When the Romans didn't have a screw jack, the metallurgy was trying different kinds of ball bearings and shit. That's something way outside. I mean, the 1700s. The 1700s, we're talking right at the cusp of them actually making structural steel. You know, this is the beginning of iron bridges and shit. They were actually making good metallurgy then, and it still took trial and error to move this stone. And that stone is basically the same size as the ones at Baalbek, a tiny bit bigger. But the same kind of issues where they would have had to jack that thing up, they would have had to, which would have took steel or hard metal. They had to have some highly advanced metallurgy for the time. Not as good as we have now, but 1700s level of metallurgy. That's what it would have taken.
And the Romans did not have that
Not even
level of
fucking close.
So that's the thing. So there's something that you informed me of, Dan, and this is, let me just give you a shout out. Hey, everybody, go subscribe to Debunking on YouTube. Your channel is a gold mine that is you are bridging together the facts that the alternative theorists are presenting, as well as the academics, and you're differentiating the truth. And your channel is so valuable. And what you taught me is that the invention of the screw jack was utilized in order to lift that thunderstone, the bronze horseman, on top of those metal rails. So with the Romans didn't have that. That wasn't invented until thousands of years later. So without that screw jack, they would have never been able to lift it in the first place.
That stone would have just sat there. Because
You said something that you don't believe in ancient technology.
I don't believe in ancient high technology in the regards that, generally speaking, when you start
Can
getting
you put this microphone?
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
I'm
Put it
so
like
sorry.
this replace.
I'm so sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'm not a believer in ancient high technology in the regards that I don't believe even ancient steam engines will be like push. When you start talking like really advanced stuff, I tend to look for other explanations. I tend to look for, stone was the premier building material for hominids for like millions of years, literally millions of years. So father passed to his son how to do this sort of thing, and eventually you get to a point where you start working with metal, and that kind of just dies off. We quit doing that for a while, and then 1,000 years goes by, and we look at what our ancestors used to do, and we're like, holy shit. But I honestly think a lot of the stuff, if we just saw how they did it, we would just be like, well, fuck, why can I think of that? But
Wait a minute. When you're talking about moving things that are 1,000 tons, and you're moving them through the mountains, like how? Why wouldn't you believe in
Well,
such
let's put it this way. I'm not opposed to the idea, but we need to get there first. Like if we're talking about the Thunderstone or the Baalbek stones, going from, I feel like we need to exhaust every other possibility before we can start hanging our hat on something bigger.
Okay, what other possibilities could you even conceive of?
That's, I'd have to look into the conversation.
But it is technology.
Well,
Right?
I'm honest. Yeah, it would be
a form of very sophisticated technology.
it would-
You can move something out of it.
It would be definitely something bigger, better than we know, or different than we know. But like I give an example that I've used it with Jim before was, when this World War II ended, America ended all these sniper schools overseas to tighten the budget. And when Vietnam started, we didn't have any sniper schools, and the NCOs on the ground saying we need trained snipers. They had to actually recruit snipers, sharpshooters for the American Olympics team because we didn't have trained snipers anymore. In 20 years, we had better tools, but worse results because of the lack of skills. So I'm of the opinion that there's some.
You're right, but the sniper is something that we're all very well aware of. It's conceivable. It's obvious how you do it. You could explain it to the layperson.
Yeah, you can. But it was something that still there was a skill set that was lost in just 20 years. That's all. I think that like a lot of things, you see a lot of the ideas for moving the big rocks. So some guys will use like they think that like water pressure vacuums were used to pull rocks up tubes. You see all kinds of interesting hypotheses that use lower tech means. I tend to think most of them that don't work, but I tend to think that those would be the direction we should be looking before we go to ancient high technology. And again, the reason that I think that is because if we do get to ancient high technology, we really need to have eliminated everything else by get there in order to be taken seriously. I guess that's kind of how I look at it. I'm a more skeptical person.
Real quick. So let's back up to this. Let's see if we agree on this. Would you agree that what we were taught in school, that the ancients were more sophisticated than the described?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Then there you go. So we're on the same page because it's like, what's technology? Like, do they have space lasers and hydraulics? I'm not suggesting that.
Technology.
Right, a horse saddle technology, right? So they had something else.
Oh yeah, they definitely. I guess when I get to when I think when most people think high technology, like you say, space lasers and stuff, powered things, like something where they were no longer using human power or water power, something they were harnessing energy or doing sophisticated chemistry, things like that's where I start to be like, well, I need more evidence to go that far with it. However, the moving of the big rocks is something that I'm quick to say that in order to do it, if we were to do it, we would need technology well outside of what they had available to them at the time. And in my opinion, if you look at those, like the Baalbek, to go back to that, you've got the three big stones that were put in the wall that don't have the Roman unit of measurement used. And we got 3 big rocks in the ground that do have the ability to measurement. I think that they gave up. They realized they weren't able to do it. They had one group carving them, and the guys cast the room looking, what the fuck are you guys like? I don't know any of these things. You're on track.
And the fact that it's undocumented, like the foundation of Baalbek is completely undocumented. Go ahead.
You were saying something about dating it to 11,000 years.
Jamie, if you go to the Baalbek folder, you'll find an encyclopedia article that describes the evidence of human habitation at Baalbek dating back 9,000 BC, which is 11,000 years ago. And I'm not suggesting these stones were created back then. I'm open to it.
What is the evidence? Like, what kind of evidence? Pottery?
Sure. I'd have to go read through the scientific article, but humans were there 11,000 years ago.
Yes.
Right.
And the fact that they don't document when the Romans were, see right there. And there's another.
History that dates back at least 11,000 years, encompassing significant periods such as prehistoric, Canaanite, Hellenistic, and Roman eras. After Alexander the Great conquered the city in 334 BCE, he renamed it Heliopolis, Greek for Sun City. The city flourished under Roman rule.
Now, let me say this real quick, Jamie. Will you go to the picture of the mountains in this folder? So this is something that's unbelievable. All right, so just scroll through all these photos of the mountains, because here's something that people need to understand that is unbelievably significant, which is that at Baalbek, there are approximately 200 rose granite columns that were transported from the Aswan quarry in Egypt, which is 700 miles as the bird flies. And what's wild is that the only way to get them to Baalbek, because the Baalbek is located in the middle of the Lebanon mountains, and it has an average elevation of 8,000 feet, with peaks reaching over 10,000 feet. As you can see, there's a freaking ski resort there, which I couldn't believe when I was driving there. There was literally the ski lifts. I went there in September. So they had to bring all of those multi-ton stone columns from Egypt, and the only way to get there was over these mountains, which is mind-blowing.
And what you're saying by how the crow flies, as the crow flies, what people need to understand is that doesn't take into account elevation changes.
Right.
So if you have a flat line like a bird and you're flying from one point to another, that's 700 miles. But if you have to go up and down and up and down and up and down, it's significantly larger.
And
in the measurement, it's not 700 miles; it's probably double that.
Right. And that's an excellent point. And it's like, then the question is like, why would they do this? Like, why would they go out of the how and why?
Why is like it's cool, but how is the real question? Like, obviously we built things because it's cool,
right?
You know, if you go to the Acropolis and the Parthenon, you go, why do you do it? Well, it's fucking cool, you know. But like people like to leave cool shit behind,
right?
But you look at Baalbek, so there's a lot of interesting things about it. Like, it has the largest temple of Jupiter out of anywhere in the Roman Empire. Generally speaking, it's got some of the biggest temples in the Roman Empire, period. But it's a far-flung corner of their empire, and it's not an important city, really. I mean, it's semi-important in the region, but it's certainly no Cairo or anything.
Right.
But it has all these huge temples. My thinking is that they showed up, and there was this massive stonework there. Now, these are the Romans. These can't have the locals thinking their ancestors were better than the Romans, so they fucking hijacked it. You just build big shit on top of it. This is now ours. We put our stamp on it. This is a Roman building. This is all Roman now. This was never your ancestors. This was always ours. And then the locals can't look to their forefathers or whatever legends they had in a couple generations. Just the power of it.
Well, even the Parthenon, it's built on the Acropolis. The Acropolis is older than the Parthenon. And it's, who made that? Everybody just shrugs their shoulders. Other folks?
Stay away from the mysteries.
We put up here.
What's interesting about Baalbek as well is that it's in the Bible. The Lebanon Mountains are mentioned 103 times in the Bible. I am not a Bible thumper. I am a believer in a divine creation. I'm proud to say it because I've seen the proof in my own life. However, what's interesting about Baalbek is that they said that it was created by Baal, which is like this demon entity in the Bible, and they declare it as the world's first civilization after the flood, and it was created by giants as punishment for their iniquities of the flood.
Oh, wow.
And I have an article about it, Jamie. If you scroll through, you'll find it.
Now we're in the Anunnaki.
Yeah, well, there you go. Right. So hold on. Go back to those cranes. Let me tell you this. So what you're looking at here is the Romans' most sophisticated crane in their history. It had a max lifting capacity of 6.6 tons. In other words, to lift just one of those trilithon stones, you would need 133 of these. which is obviously completely not feasible whatsoever. You wouldn't have the space to do it, and it's just ridiculous to suggest you would coordinate 133 cranes around it. So this is what I'm trying to say, is that it's further suggestive evidence that the Romans didn't build it because they didn't have the capability to lift stones of that mass.
Yeah, it's still pretty fascinating. The Romans were able to build a crane that could lift 6 tons.
That's amazing.
But not enough to even lift the stones that were inside the king's chamber.
Right? So let me put this into perspective. So the largest stones inside the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid are approximately 80 tons imperial. So actually 78 tons imperial or 70 tons metric. Were moved some 500 miles from the Aswan quarry and lifted and stacked hundreds of feet above the ground. But here's what's wild is that those stones, the largest stones in the Great Pyramid, compared to the Trilithon stones are 15 times heavier. Not twice as heavy,
Those
not
stones
3
are-
times as heavy, not 10 times as heavy.
As a guy who's skeptical of that, of ancient high technology, there's a couple of things that make it where it's like, I straight up can't explain. Baalbek is one of them. You can use those cranes and lay them on their side and drag that stone across the ground. That's exactly what they did with the Thunderstone after the Great Stone. But then you are tasked with lifting that son of a bitch, and all of a sudden you're right back to where you started. You can drag it across however you want, but when you get to picking it up 14 feet off the ground,
And they dragged it on those rails, though.
yeah,
That's sophisticated
and
rails.
More than 23 feet up.
Oh yeah, we went 30 feet. Right?
Yeah, it was 30 feet. Is documented. I have 23 feet illustrated because it's where the ground is now.
Right.
But it's the foundation of it goes subsurface. So it's like, with these details, like there's a reason why there is a growing interest in the mysteries of lost ancient civilizations, because smart people of all kinds of walks of life are looking into the nuanced details and realizing, like, oh, wait a second. Like when Graham Hancock says that there's a missing chapter of human history, like this is reality. We don't know how they built the Great Pyramid. It is a fact that the Egyptians left us with no explanation of any kind. Out of the tens of thousands of hieroglyphs all over Egypt, not a single one of them describes how they constructed the pyramid or how they cut granite stones. Not one.
Yeah, there's big gaps in the knowledge is where we end up having these kinds of discussions. And I think to go back to where we first started, we mentioned Flint at the beginning, that we have a problem, in my opinion, that most people that see things kind of like I do, as opposed to like Jimmy or yourself does, where they're looking, but where it's I kind of need to take my steps to get to that ancient high technology.
Right.
They end up going that just straight debunker route. And then they get skeptical. They're not skeptical, they get cynical. They turn into assholes. They're looking for ways to shoot this down. I just fuck your idea, right? Your idea is wrong, and so I know what the implications are. Instead of saying, well, maybe there's other implications, let's have a discussion about it, they just go straight to, no, this is impossible, this is stupid, make fun of the person, compare it to flat eartherism, compare it to aliens.
Nazism.
Even worse. Yeah, Flint's case is even worse. He somehow or another connects it to white supremacy.
It's not just Flint, it's that fucking John Hoops, man. He's the one that started that shit. He's that guy, Wikipedia, we could talk about that for a quick second. John Hoops is professor for Kansas University, and he is been one of the earliest editors of Wikipedia consistently. Graham Hancock's page, Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis page, all kinds of pseudo-archaeology and all pyramids in Atlantis, all that shit. He's got a lot. It's not just that he edits it. Him and his buddies edit it, and you can't go into that. There's a scientist from the Comet Research Group that tried to edit the Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis page and was told he can't because it's a conflict of interest. A fucking scientist that works on this shit's a conflict of interest, but a scientist from outside the field isn't.
By the way, John Hoops studied at Harvard and Yale. He got his undergrad, I believe, from Harvard and his PhD from Yale, or vice versa. This is significant. It is controlling the information.
And he hides this stuff too. He'll tell you that. He'll tell. I watched him tell Forbes, "Hey, you guys need to cite Wikipedia instead of just because they said the Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis, and they just made a real quick article about it with no skepticism." He says you need to cite Wikipedia as well. He edits the Wikipedia page and doesn't mention that he edits it when he tells people to go look at the fucking thing.
What's his motivation for
He hates
debunking this stuff?
He doesn't like Graham Hancock. He thinks the same kind of thing. He thinks pseudo-archaeology is all that is. See, if you believe in ancient high technology or you believe in Atlantis, you must be a white supremacist, a racist, a misogynist.
Let's forget about Atlantis for a minute, but I definitely want to talk about it. But what you're seeing is impossible. It's essentially impossible with today's technology. When you're talking about those stones that were moved 700 miles through the mountains, If you tried to bring some engineers together in the United States in 2024, the best and the brightest, and said, "Here's your project," they would say, "Fuck you."
You
You
need
can't
more
do
muscle
it.
levels of money.
Yeah,
Right.
you would need super billionaire money, and even then, I don't know how you would do it. I just don't. I can't conceivably think of a way. And that's what's so interesting about this stuff is that whatever they did was not just complicated for the time. It was so beyond our imagination of what was possible at the time that it's beyond our imagination of what's possible today. So it throws these facts, the physical facts about the size and the location they were brought from, that fly in the face of logic and credibility and our understanding of what's possible, not just then, but today. So for anybody to say, "Oh, we figured this out," hey man, fuck you. And you definitely haven't. And the problem is that you have these fucking names attached to you, Harvard and Yale. And you've decided because there's a group of people that have been studying this stuff and they fucking wrote some shit down and you studied what they wrote down and you did your own studying and you got a degree, you're the guy. You're the only one. And it's these same fucking weirdo weasels that put their pronouns in their Twitter bio and they're just crackpots. They're crackpots masquerading as intellectuals because the things that they're saying are completely bizarre. They're all 100% of them are captured by this woke ideology. 100%. They're weird people, man, because they exist in this structure that's been completely compromised. And that's our education. Our higher education systems have been completely compromised. And this is not to say that they don't teach you amazing stuff about medicine and science. Of course they do. But they are also in a cult.
It is a total cult behavior. And honestly, it's their religion. That
It is
like,
a
the motive.
they're mostly atheists. Yes.
They are. Let me just share this. So, with the biggest critics and the naysayers of alternative theories, there's a common denominator. Like when you mentioned the pronouns in their profile, almost all of them have it, and they're not trans. And if you look at their political ideologies, it is extremely left. And these people are visceral. They're toxic. And let me just make a side point that I almost forgot. Is when we're talking about Wikipedia, a lot of people say, well, that's why you don't look at Wikipedia. You don't trust it. Who cares about Wikipedia? I'm like, excuse me. It shows up at the top of Google on anything that you search. So it cannot be ignored. And when you're talking a moment ago about the impossibility of the movement of these stones, I want to just emphasize this point one more time, which is that the movement of that 340-ton stone at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art is 1/3 the weight of the largest stones in ancient history. And when you look at what it took to do it, so it's like when people, when you're using the word impossible, it's like, listen, what it took for us to do that, it was 1/3 of the weight, and we had to custom build this 260-foot-long truck with 196 wheels.
We have internal combustion engines.
Hydraulics.
Have roads that are flat,
Far better metal, far better roads.
Yeah.
And like
The
thousands of
roads.
years of experience.
The roads, one reason why they had to go 106 miles is because they had to go around different roads because most roads can support the weight. Like, this is why people that look into this, like, don't listen to Jimmy the YouTuber. Like, look into the details on yourself, and you realize that this is completely inexplicable. And it's so important now because we're living at a time where people are starting to realize that not everything we were taught was true. In fact, a lot of things you see in the mainstream media nowadays have been utterly debunked. It's all propaganda. And
about history, about recent history that's easily proven, and the mainstream media will tell false narratives.
Right.
Absolutely. And so we know that people lie. So we know that people lie. We know that people love to be in a position of authority, to be the only people that are allowed to distribute the truth. We know that.
do you want to get provocative real quick? Sure. So nowadays, there's a lot of conjecture about the historical accuracy of different things involving World War II. And Jamie, if you were to go to the Baalbek folder, or in fact, go to the folder called swastika. So this is something that I got tremendous heat for. Whereas that when I went to Baalbek, I noticed that there were swastikas all over the place. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. That's interesting. What a lot of people are not aware of is that the swastika is prehistoric. It's found on 5 continents around the world and dates back approximately 10,000 years. It is found in Europe, Africa, Asia, North and South America, all before transoceanic sea travel was thought to be possible. If you scroll through the images, Jamie, you'll kind of give the audience an understanding. Now, let me preface this whole conversation with this. Fuck Hitler. right? Like he,
Nazis.
right? He stole the symbol, which was a symbol of peace, and he bastardized it. So this right here, I took this photo. You'd almost think it's photoshopped in. This is this is a photo. This is real. And I'm like, well, this is fascinating. I put this up on Twitter and I said, did Hitler know something about ancient history that we don't? And the reason why, and this was a sincere question, everyone started calling me a Nazi. I was spreading dangerous Nazism for it. No, this is a grown-up conversation. Yeah. Hitler was he was evil, but he was intelligent, and the Nazis were arguably the most technologically advanced country at that time in World War II. The jet engine, rockets, and for some reason, for reasons that I cannot find a definitive answer on, is why was Hitler so into archaeology? They call it Nazi archaeology. And the mainstream people will say, oh, well, he weaponized, he was trying to get this Aryan thing going to unite people and just create an enemy.
They'll kick it to Himmler a lot. They'll say that Himmler was the one that was really into that shit.
Yeah. And so that's, by the way, that's Peru, like 800 years ago. You'll find the Native Americans, the Pima Indians, the Navajo, the Apache.
There's actually a Hindu temple in Los Angeles that was near my old house, and we went to visit it. You could actually have weddings there, and they had to have a sign up explaining why there's so many swastikas in the building. The swastikas all over.
I went to Japan, and it's the same thing there. They have swastikas on different shrines.
Okinawan karate, when I was a kid, Okinawan karate, one of their patches was a swastika. And this was when I was a kid. So this is in the 80s when I was studying when I first started studying martial arts. You could get these Okinawan karate patches that had a swastika on it. Had nothing to do with Hitler. It had to do with Japan.
Right.
Well,
sorry, go ahead. All right, so real quick, while Jamie's on this slide, this is from the Hopewell Mound people, which is in modern-day Ohio, and that dates back 2,200 years ago.
Jesus Christ, this is from modern-day Ohio 2,000 years ago?
2,200 years ago. And so here's the point that I'm making about the swastika, is that people debate on whether it was the Milky Way galaxy, the Big Dipper, whatever you want to see its origins were. I do not think that it's a coincidence that a symbol is so specific as it is found on 5 continents around the world before transoceanic sea travel was said to be possible. Because just to remind the audience, it wasn't until 1492 when Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. And it's like, no, I believe this is strong suggestive evidence that humans were traversing the continents and the oceans thousands of years before we were taught in school, which is evidence of being more advanced than we were taught in school.
Right. Now, where did they think this thing was?
Well, I have an idea about that. I mean, it's not, it's just Dan's idea, but the four directions across the swastika, that's pretty commonly used, even in Native American culture, as like cardinal points, right? This is north, south, east, and west. So this could be a symbol for the passage of time. Here's this sky is turning, the cardinal points turn.
Rotation of the Earth, along with the points of the compass.
Exactly. Now, that's what but that's just an idea. I mean, that doesn't it doesn't really add a whole lot of context to it as far as
Why not just have a cross then? Up, down, left, right.
Isn't it crazy that a geometric pattern is evil? Yeah, not just a geometric pattern, but a mustache.
But it's funny. It is.
Like, your beard is fine. Nobody has any problem with it. But imagine, if oh, you have a wizard beard. You believe in child sacrifice. It's crazy. It's very strange what we've done, and obviously that's how horrific Hitler was.
So here's something people need to understand. I want to emphasize this point. Hitler, people need to look into the details. He was looking for giants in Africa. They set a mission to
look for the also on meth.
Yeah. I mean, he's looking for giants in Africa.
Bro, we're gonna go find dinosaurs.
Yeah. I love it. The thing is, though, it's like I have not found an answer on why he was looking for the Ark of the Covenant. He was looking for Thor's hammer and the Holy Grail. And the thing is, to me, I'm like, I feel like there's something that they knew about ancient history that we don't. I don't know if this is true or not, but I feel like I can't find a straight answer. And let me tell you this: if you go Googling for answers on Hitler's interest in archaeology,
comes back right
you're going to find the same article. So this is actually kind of explosive. About 2 years ago, I made a video about Google sabotaging the search results. Because remember how it'll show you if you Google some topic, it'll say there's like a billion results.
Yeah.
So I made a video on this, and they would max out at it didn't used to be this way, because I remember watching a video years ago of people going thousands of pages to find some blog spot in some topic. It then became limited. I did an experiment myself many times on benign topics such as pancakes was one of them. I typed in pancakes. I had like a billion results, like 700 million results. And then it would only go back to page 41. And then it would recycle them. All those pages before, the dozens of pages, would recycle some of the same exact mainstream articles.
Mm.
And so I did this on all kinds of topics. And now Google has since removed the page numbers. And so you can only just go see more, see more, see more. And so if you Google any type of topic, and if you're looking for answers on this, they're going to keep sending you the same regurgitated mainstream articles. So I can't find a reliable answer on why Hitler was so invested in ancient history. And again, I don't give a shit about his Aryan stuff. Like,
Right? Why was he into the occult? Why was he?
Right. I want to know why he was looking for the Ark of the Covenant.
Well, obviously, their engineering was insane. I mean, to this, like, look, so many of our best vehicles that we buy today, the most coveted vehicles, came out of Nazi Germany, and rich Audi, right? Volkswagen, this is Porsche, BMW, Bavarian Motorworks. I mean, all that shit came from the fucking Nazis. I mean, have you ever seen Hitler's race car?
No.
Hitler had an Audi race car.
Really?
Yeah, man. It's worth like a shit ton of money. See if you can find Hitler's race car. But this was, I mean, their engineering was superior. This is the reason why we had Operation Paperclip. So Operation Paperclip, we brought over all of the best Nazi rocket scientists.
The ones that the
Wernher
colonies
von
didn't
Braun.
bring.
Yeah, that's how we got NASA. We got NASA essentially from Nazis.
That's the
Use the
lousy.
V2 to put the on the boat. I mean,
Oh man,
basically,
yeah, that's his original race car. Isn't that fucking crazy?
that was basically a V2
That's an
rocket.
Audi, right? Isn't that what was the Mercedes Benz? Did he have more than one? I believe he had a later one, but that's it. That's the one.
Wow.
So that one had the Audi symbol in front of it.
Can you just clarify your pronouns so I know not to be offended that you're interested in this?
I'm he, him. I'm an American man. We're coming to your town. So look at that photograph. Click on that. Auto Union. I guess that was what Audi's original name was. Isn't that crazy? Look at that car. It's pretty sharp. Pretty fucking dope. I mean,
Where is it
imagine in 1939. Oh my God, it's probably worth. It's worth 5.5 million pounds.
And illegal to sell on so many markets.
Is that pounds?
And,
What that is?
yeah.
That little sign?
So many things that would be like, oh, that's Hitler's card. No,
Yeah.
sorry, we can't have you listing that here, buddy. Sorry.
Well, Tom Segura bought Bert Kreischer a cup that apparently was one of Hitler's cups.
Like one that he
cup.
held?
Yeah,
Really?
allegedly, but you know.
Let's get him in the studio and see this thing.
Yeah, but if you have that, you're a monster. But if you had Genghis Khan's sword, you're fucking cool.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting. That's a good comparison.
You
Yeah.
killed a lot more people. You
Yeah.
killed 10% of the population of Earth.
But he
Right.
didn't long enough ago that you don't hear anybody talking about it.
He raped so many people that his DNA is in a giant percentage of people today.
It's like 20%. It's something
It's so crazy. We've done it before. I forget the number, but they're really nutty. But the point is there's something particularly disgusting to us about that one genocide, and it's really interesting. And you wonder like how long it's going to take. I mean, Dan Carlin's talked about this in depth because he talks about the Mongols and that it's so far in the past. And we're talking about like 1200 AD. It's so far in the past that we look at it with almost like an objective perspective instead of a moral perspective. So we say, one thing that Genghis Khan did that was great, he opened up trade to the east, and he was a believer of all religions. You could practice anything, he didn't impose anything on people. But he fucking killed everybody. He's way worse than Hitler. He killed 10% of the population of Earth. But the Nazis were so recent. We have grandfathers that are alive today that fought in World War II, and they can tell you, like, hey man, I fucking remember this shit. And when we have Jews like Ari Shafir's dad, who was in the concentration camp. Ari Shafir's dad has a tattoo on his arm.
That's wild.
Yeah, his dad's in his 80s.
Wow. That recent memory is a big part. Like I see the Hunter S. Thompson stuff on your wall. You read his book of Hell's Angels.
Yeah.
You remember him talking about that aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
That the bikers, the Hell's Angels rocked Nazi memorabilia. He asked the guy why. Why don't you? And he's like, because my dad fought the Nazis and he fucking hates this. So I wear this because I wear this just to piss off my dad.
A lot of that is contrarian.
But but my point is that he wouldn't. Genghis Khan wouldn't be doing anything, right?
Right.
This has an emotional attachment. Genghis Khan's mustache would be fine on me, right? People might laugh at me a little bit, but
Yeah, it's here. I can see a picture. Yeah, they don't know what he looks like. Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's
But
pretty
then
wild.
it's the Nazi thing, the fact that it's so horrific. It just like puts anyone who has anything to say that's coloring outside the lines. You get labeled a Holocaust denier, an anti-Semite. The worst labels that I can put on you. And a good example of that is that podcast. What was his name? But it was the Tucker Carlson controversy where he had this guy on his podcast and he was talking about what William Churchill's role in the Holocaust was, because they had put these embargoes on Germany and basically starving everybody to death. And they just started calling them the Holocaust denier. It's like not what he was talking about at all. That's not what he was saying at all. He was just saying, no, there's a multifaceted explanation for why they decided to exterminate all these Jews, and part of it was because of an embargo, where they were starving people out. What is his podcast called? It's excellent. I listen to it all the time, but my brain's broken right now. I just got out of the gym. Come on, meet him.
It's something I know what you're talking about. I'm trying to blank on it as well.
Martyrmate, that's right. Martyrmate. He's Martyrmate on Twitter and Instagram, and to call that guy an anti-Semite or a Holocaust denier is so stupid. He's a brilliant guy, and his podcast is excellent, and he's really sensitive and well balanced. He gives a very comprehensive view of things. It's not in any way prejudiced. It's a great podcast.
you're not allowed to color outside the lines.
Well, yeah, that's only. He was just saying that Churchill was one of the villains.
Yeah, and that's realistic. Like there are multiple different reasons for that. If you tighten up their belt, that's not gonna be passed to the top. That's gonna go straight to the people in the camps.
Exactly.
It's real. That's no brainer.
Right, and that's not justifying the murder of all those Jews. That's not what he's doing. That's what's so crazy about stifling discourse.
Yeah.
Because that was a fascinating conversation, and we should be considering that. Like, wow, that's crazy. There's so many factors, so many horrible things going on all together.
Well, they say you're supposed to learn from history, but how the fuck are you going to learn from history if you actually take the lessons out of it?
Right.
I mean, this is an important thing. And you think about this right now with the stuff in the Middle East in the last 20 years. Every time we put an embargo on there, we're not starving Saddam Hussein. We're starving people in these freaking prisons. Remember that.
Dave Smith was talking about that on the podcast recently that during the Clinton administration, the embargoes starved to death 500,000 children.
Yeah. See, that's fucked. Yeah, and that's worth remembering. It doesn't. If having that conversation makes somebody call you a Holocaust denier, that person should be out of the conversation, in my opinion.
Right.
And like you were saying, academia is chock full of this.
And they should be shamed. They should be shamed by people who want to know the whole picture.
The opposite of knowledge.
Right. It's certainly not condoning Holocausts. It's so stupid to not be looking at everything.
The good news is that people are waking up to this. A lot of people think just like us, where they're objective enough to understand that, like, well, that's silly.
Yeah.
And so they're putting themselves in a corner in this echo chamber where people just aren't listening to them anymore. Like, when it comes to like mainstream archaeology, big archaeology, establishment archaeology, they're putting themselves into a corner where people, like, if I'm gonna ask questions about the swastika and you're saying spreading dangerous Nazism, some people buy into it, but I've noticed that most people are like, no, he's asking the question.
Well, we have the internet now. We have shows like yours and mine where you can have conversations about things, and people get to see, oh, these people that are in control, they're all loons, and they're all telling us that you have to think this one way, or you're the worst person on earth. And I don't buy it. No, it's a dumb way to look at the world.
It's un-American. Sorry to
really
flag for a
is.
second. But yeah,
It really is.
proud to live in a country where I can have somebody with the pronouns in their fucking bio and somebody who's not with the pronoun. We can both yell at each other and not have us end up in jail over it.
It's also this position that people have when they're teachers, when they're educators, and they have this position, and I can speak to it a little bit from martial arts, because in martial arts, when I first started doing martial arts, it was in the 1980s. In the 1980s, every discipline believed they had the very best discipline. All the judo people thought judo was the only martial art you needed to know. All the karate people thought karate was it. Taekwondo people where I came from, they all believed in Taekwondo. And it took
UFC.
the UFC to slam everything together and go, oh, Jesus, this stuff is fucking useless.
Yep.
And, some of it's not useless, right? There's some things from, like, John Jones won the UFC heavyweight title this past weekend with a Taekwondo kick.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
That was unbelievable.
And I'm so happy because that was my thing. So me watching him do that was like, yes, why aren't more people doing this? Like, you guys should have been doing this from the beginning. It's the most powerful kick in the sport. But you were in trouble if you trained in other disciplines. Like, Bruce Lee was a heretic.
Mm-hmm.
And he's probably one of the most important figures in martial arts, not just because he introduced people to, like myself, who became martial artists because I was a Bruce Lee fan. He also combined all kinds of different martial arts, and that was Jeet Kune Do.
Mm-hmm.
He developed a style that was essentially, he took Western boxing, he took some judo that he learned, and karate, and all these different techniques, and just tried to find what is the absolute best thing for just fighting. And that was, he was a heretic. Like, his life was threatened for that. And it's because the educators want to be the only people that can distribute information, and they don't want to be challenged. When I was in high school, I had a teacher. His name was Mr. Hall. He was a very nice guy, but he was a smart guy that wanted to be the only smart guy. And he was great talking to me because I was a stupid kid. But unfortunately, one day I had watched a documentary, and I've always had a very good ability to recall things. And we were in class, and he was talking about the pollution in Lake Erie. And I had just watched a documentary about the extensive work that they had done to clean up Lake Erie, and that they'd made these huge strides in removing pollution and crap and all these different things from Lake Erie. And he was talking about stuff that he had learned in school 20 years prior. And so when I said, well, there's a PBS documentary, and I brought this up in class, where there's been this extensive work, and they talked about the amazing accomplishments of cleaning up Lake Erie. And he got so mad. I'm like, you're not mad at me, man. You're mad at PBS. Like, I don't fucking do any research. I watched a documentary. But back then, you could say you don't know what you're talking about, and I couldn't pull my phone out and go, oh, but what? Look at that.
Right.
You can watch it, dude. Like, these people have done amazing work cleaning up Lake Erie. But he didn't want anyone else to have any information other people. What he should have said is, that's fascinating. I haven't seen that documentary. Could you recall the name of it? Mm-hmm. Let's see if we can get it, maybe show it to the class.
Right.
I'm going to try to do that because that's great. That's a good sign. What I'm talking about is what Lake Erie had become because of industrial engineering, and because of pollution and waste that was coming from all these plants. So he was correct. But time had changed, and he did not like that I knew that, and he didn't know that. And I remember being in that class going, this is so crazy. This is my fucking science teacher. My science teacher doesn't want details. He doesn't want facts.
This happened to me. So I was in the military years ago, and it wasn't long after I got home from Iraq, and I was going to Warrior Leadership Course, which is to become an E5 sergeant. And back then they were teaching ABC, which is airway, bleeding, what was the other one? Circulation, whatever, for emergency medical response if someone's dying. And they had since updated where bleeding is the most important thing to focus on because soldiers were bleeding out. And during this Warrior Leadership Course, they're teaching the class. 30 people, wrong information is since outdated. I try to interject to say, oh, this is what they're teaching now. It was the same exact thing that happened. He didn't stop, no, this is what's written down right here. I'm like, no, but that's not even what they're teaching in theater right now. Like, I'm trying to, this is medical emergency stuff that could save someone's life. And he didn't want to hear it one bit. And I couldn't believe it. I was astonished.
He should have said, that's interesting. I did not know that. We need to update what we're showing you. These three factors are the same, but now we know, thank you, Jimmy, now we know that bleeding is more primary. But it shouldn't be, that's the response of a real leader.
Right.
And a real leader, like this, you're always going to have blowhards in class. They're going to want to hear their own voice. They want to talk about stuff and chime in and correct people. And you got to let a certain amount of that. And that's the internet. And people don't like that. And that's why they wanted to ban people from Twitter. They don't like these people coming along that have ideas that, like the Great Barrington Declaration, where they, the government actually conspired to get these people removed from Twitter. We know that because Elon, thank God, bought Twitter and changed discourse. But this was a concerted effort to take these people who were brilliant people, who had degrees, were experts in this field that they were discussing, and they decided they were going to remove them because they didn't go along with the narrative and they were confusing people in a time where they're trying to force vaccinations on everyone.
Right.
The emotional side of it from the individual levels, like what you guys described, you have a teacher with emotional reaction. That's a huge part of it. But when that's a huge part of it, especially with archaeology, because a lot of it's not really hard science. A lot of it's like, I've got this arrowhead here and I've conjured up this story, and so now it's my story, and you're not attacking the science, you're attacking me. But it gets even worse when you look at it, when you get like this hate for Graham Hancock, in particular Graham Hancock. That makes it where it's like you can't trust a damn word that comes out of the mouth when they're discussing. Like if we were talking about back to the martial arts, one of the things that came out was like, was just ass. It's no good at all for like man-to-man combat. That was for like samurais that have been knocked off a horse or some shit.
Well, it was designed to redistribute the energy in your attack. Okay, so if someone's coming at you with a sword, if you don't have a sword and a guy swings a sword and you're fast enough to get away from the path of the sword and grab the guy's arm or body and manipulate him to the ground to remove the sword, it's essentially a disarming.
Okay, so it's not the best thing.
It just
in the
doesn't
world.
work against a wrestler.
Okay,
And that makes it way better. Wrestling is if you want to find out the best way to take a person to the ground and control them, we 100% know it's wrestling.
Yeah, you just grab
The most ancient sport in the world that dates back to
Yes.
the Sumerians.
And by the way, in wrestling, I include judo. I include different forms of jujitsu that were ancient, because these allowed people to manipulate limbs and to control joints, which allowed them also to take people down and submit them. But the point is, you had a bunch of people believing that this one goofy ass martial art was the end all be all because of a good Steven Seagal movie.
Exactly. No, my point was there is it's like you're considered pretty much an expert in martial arts. You're not like you're a professional announcer for UFC, so you know your shit. So if I watched you say Steven Seagal, his martial arts, it's fucking Aikido, man. I don't know what to tell you.
But I would not do that. I would tell you Steven Seagal was really good.
Yeah.
Really good at Aikido.
But if you hated Steven Seagal, if you were one of his many haters, you could just attack Aikido without ever saying his name, and just be digging him with dicks, right? You could just be burying him without ever mentioning Steven Seagal's name. You could just attack Aikido. Aikido is this shit martial art. It's not effective. It's not very good. And then by extension, you're making Steven Seagal look bad. And this is one of their favorite tactics to do to Hancock. They will attack. This idea is racist. It's inherently bullshit. We don't have to mention Hancock's name. No, it's just they just ruin the two. They are so insidious this way.
Yeah, and the connecting Hancock to white supremacy and aliens is the dumbest one. Because first of all, he never said nothing about aliens. Not only that, not only does he not think of it as white people built this stuff, he thinks it's the people that live there. But they lived there a long ass time ago. It's the same fucking people. It's Africans.
Yeah.
Whoever built the pyramids, they were Africans. Like I'm an American.
Let me just remind the
That's where
audience,
they live.
Egypt is in Africa.
That is northern Africa, and it's the most sophisticated construction we have ever witnessed on the face of the earth. Yeah, anybody that disagrees, you need to really study what they accomplished in the Great Pyramid. It's mind-boggling precision. It's not just the incredible feat of moving massive stones hundreds of miles through the mountains. It's the mind-boggling precision of the construction of these buildings that it's so crazy. It's almost like they made it so nutty that even if everything dissolved and it would give us at least some clue that maybe something happened. Maybe people had achieved a level of sophistication. And my thought is, and this is just a guess, is that as we move towards metal and we move towards using different kinds of combustion engines and electronics, we moved in a very specific area of technology. And we were allowed to do this because things have been relatively peaceful for a couple hundred years. Okay? Right. Relatively peaceful. And also, there's war in other places, so it allowed us to spend our time here devising ways to fuck up people over there. That's the Manhattan Project, right? But if you have a completely different avenue that thinking goes in and innovation goes in, and instead of combustion engines and electronics, you have something that we haven't even considered. And that, to me, seems like what Egypt is. It seems to me that they have this incredibly fertile area. So when people look at Egypt now, you're looking at all the sand and all the shit. That is not what it looked like. In the thousands of years before the construction of the pyramid, it was a rainforest. It was fertile. And so my thought is these people probably had plenty of food. And so they didn't have to go anywhere. And so they weren't attacked that often. The Nubians conquered them, and that's when the statues started changing, looking more Southern African. But you have these people that live in this incredibly resource-rich place, and they were able to spend thousands of years there. And I think in those thousands of years, they devised methods that we still haven't even considered because we went in a different path, and we can't consider any other paths. We consider our path, and we say, well, we're the furthest. We live today. Okay, so those fuckers in the past, they were basically cave people, right? That's how we look at it.
They look at them like dumb people playing with stones.
Yeah,
they were
right.
silly. Yeah, they used stones because they weren't smart enough to use metal. It's like when you look at the details of stone, it's like, you could say it's more impressive.
Well, we wanted to talk about Göbekli Tepe. And
Yeah.
Göbekli Tepe is not just fascinating in its construction, but also in the timeline. Because the timeline fucked everything. I remember when Graham Hancock and Zawi Hawass were having that big debate with that other guy who's an archaeologist, and the American guy's very smart. He's like, what evidence do you have of a civilization that lived 10,000 years ago? Well, you have one now.
Yeah.
So you have to shut the fuck up because you were wrong. So in the 1990s, the sheep herder finds a stone. He starts kicking it, moving it around, and he realizes, wow, this is a big-ass stone. I probably would bring in some smart dudes to figure this out. And they start digging, and they go, oh, Jesus. This is these huge circles of giant stone columns with 3D carved animals on them at a time that we thought people were living in teepees, right? We thought people had stone tools. We didn't think there was any metal.
We thought it had to be done the opposite way around. We thought you needed to be a hunter-gatherer, or farmer, and then you could do it. And now they had to flip that entire shit on its ear. Well, actually living.
I think they only flipped that shit on its ear to try to make it look like they were right by the timeline of hunter-gatherers, and to ignore the possibility of an ancient civilization before Mesopotamia. Because it's the only thing that makes sense. There's no way when you're just struggling to find food. Okay? And if you're going on a fishing trip or a hiking trip, it's fucking hard to get food. When we have modern stuff, it's hard to get food with a rifle. Right? So these people were getting food. And they somehow or another, in between them, while like running around trying to shoot rabbits with a bow and arrow, they figured out how to make these massive stone columns and put them in position and move them in circles and
hundreds of them.
Pretty great artists too. Doing some relief carvings. That's not the same as just
carving the animals that are related to the area. It's just like, how do you fucking know this is a thing? What is this?
So Göbekli Tepe, brother, if there is such a thing as an ancient conspiracy theory, it's this. So I remember hearing Graham Hancock come on your show back in like 2015 or 2017, and he was talking about Göbekli Tepe. And at that time, he had shared that the site was only approximately 5% excavated. It's the first video on my channel. It's like August 2017, and I shared the details of it. These pillars, in fact, 11,600 years. It appears to be purposely buried at the same time of the Andreas climate catastrophe. This is fascinating. And, excavations were continuing. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to backburn this topic of Göbekli Tepe for a little while, let them further their excavations, and I'll revisit this later when there's something new to share. So earlier this summer, I'm like, all right, let me revisit Göbekli Tepe and see what's new there. And I was astonished to learn that 5% figure was still the same. Have you heard this?
Yeah, I've watched your videos on
the YouTube channel, Bright Insight. Subscribe.
Undeniably strange. Your videos are undeniably strange. So here's some images where you can see what it kind of looks like along with this globalheritagefund.org story on it. So it shows 5%, 5%.
And that figure is still the same as of 2023. Yeah. I had partnered one. There's a lady who does tours there and corroborated the 5% figure. And there's a gentleman named Hugh Newman, who's an author and also leads tours. And he communicated with me that what they were going to do, I couldn't believe this. They're going to defer a full-scale excavation for, quote, future generations with a 150-year estimated time frame for a full excavation of Göbekli Tepe. And I'm like, wait a second. are you serious? Like, this makes no sense. We're talking about arguably not just the world's oldest ancient site, but arguably the most mysterious, because it's like you're saying, it's not supposed to exist. Based on everything we're taught in school, it's supposed to be the Sumerians. And then you have the site of Göbekli Tepe, made up of sophisticated pillars and concentric circles.
At least 5,000 years older.
Yeah, that older than, almost 7,000 years older than Stonehenge. And Stonehenge is a mystery of itself. So I start Googling and looking into the details. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. How could there possibly be, how could they defer excavations for future generations when this may be the most important ancient site on Earth involving our mysterious lost ancient past? And so I started digging into this, and I couldn't believe what I found. So they were doing large-scale excavations, but that has since ceased. Just to clarify, they are still excavating Göbekli Tepe, but they have rolled and dialed back the large-scale excavations of the years prior, and they are focusing on conservation and tourism management of the site. And like I said, with a 150-year time frame, I'm like, wait a second, I can't, and I have all the screenshots in my folder because of funding. Absolutely not. So not only have they never claimed that it's related to funding, but this is where things get bizarre, is that there's a Turkish conglomerate called the Doges Group, which consists of 250 companies within Turkey. It's a billion-dollar industry, and they're the ones that took over management and funding of the site back in 2017. And they announced this at all places. The World Economic Forum meeting in Davos in 2016 is when they announced this partnership. Initial funding of $15 million. At the time, they set up the infrastructure for tourism. Roads, sidewalks, walkways, roofing platforms. And since then is when they dialed back the excavations. And I'm like, this makes absolutely no sense. So it has, let me just be crystal clear here. It has nothing to do with funding, and they've never claimed it has anything to do with funding. But their excuses, they have said, one of which is that, well, we want to wait for future technologies to develop so we can more safely excavate the site. And I'm like, wait a second, hold on a second. We're talking about pillars buried in dirt. It's 2024. Do not tell me that we do not have the technological capability to dig rocks up.
What would be an alternative explanation?
So, okay, this is where things get fun. So, let me say a couple things before I get into it. One of which is that them saying that they're waiting for a future technology to develop to safely excavate the site. I'm like, what type of magical shovel or pressure water hose are we talking about here? Right? And since they're saying that they're continuing to excavate the site today, I'm like, well, which is it? Are you saying that you're doing so in unsafe methods? And I already know that's not the answer, because there's been no issue with destructing the site from digging it up. It's not like they broke a pillar and like, oh dang, wait a second, we need to walk this back. We're not doing things safely. That's not the case here. So there are a few explanations here. So one of which is that the most logical explanation, this is the less conspiratorial one, which is that it has to do with money. You have this Turkish conglomerate of people that are saturated with members of the World Economic Forum. For example, the CEO of the Doges Group is a longtime member of the World Economic Forum. Let me backburn the World Economic Forum for a half a second. They're business people. They took over the site, and it's all about money now. Back in 2019, Göbekli Tepe had approximately 19,000 visitors yearly. Now it's at 500,000. They're focusing, if nothing else, they're just trying to bring revenue in. It's all about money. Yeah, they don't care about even the rest of the site.
It's not going to bring 15 more million revenue.
Right, and they just want their money. Okay, but I'm like, well, that makes sense. It does make sense.
By the way, real quick, and also the mystery plays. Because that site is probably the second most popular place on the planet with people like ourselves. And the more mystery is there, the more money. The more likely we deal in mystery. So if they excavate everything and we know everything there is about that site, and it's all super mundane, there's nothing cool about it anymore. That tip dries up, and there's no money.
But how could it ever stop being?
I agree. I agree.
That one doesn't make any sense.
That's a Zahi Hawass kind of thing. He's of the same opinion where I think a lot of the same thing happened in Egypt for the same reason. Zahi Hawass is quoted as saying that those New Age people, it doesn't matter what happens in Egypt, the New Age people, they come. It's about tourism. Ever since the Arab Spring, tourism in Egypt's been lower. So I think a lot of the same, like we're going to talk in a minute about the hidden chamber in the pyramid that they located, still haven't excavated for whatever fucking reason. I think that might be part of it. If you want to get super mundane and not conspiratorial, it's just a simple. The tourists keep coming. Well, there's a mystery there. As soon as you open that up, it's just an empty chamber.
So I don't buy that.
Me either.
The mystery of the structures themselves that we've completely excavated is just so fascinating.
So let me be clear on Göbekli Tepe. It's somewhere between 5 and 10% excavated, which means that
So here's some archaeological sites that are where only 10% or less have been uncovered.
none of which date back anywhere near remotely as old as Göbekli Tepe. And so just to put this into perspective, Göbekli Tepe, according to ground penetrating radar, consists of approximately 200 T-shaped pillars. Only 72 of them have been unearthed. And as of just a few years ago, they're dialing that back to fully excavate them, which again, the 150-year time frame. And I'm like, this is entirely unacceptable. There could be hidden answers about our lost ancient past waiting to be discovered on these pillars, because all the pillars are trying to tell us some sort of story. We all have depictions, animals, all kinds of things on there.
There's the shaman with the bag.
Right, which is seen, right? We've seen that from the Sumerians. We've seen it in South America.
The bag thing is very fascinating.
It is. It's hotly debated.
I'm sure. You could say maybe it's a tool bag. You could say maybe it's psychedelics he's got in that bag.
Academics say it's a water. It's a water bucket.
You guys familiar with
there you go.
You guys familiar with the work of Martin Sweat?
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
He's the one that he was on Ancient Apocalypse season 1 for a minute. He's the guy who basically a star map of that pillar 43, and in his opinion, those 3 handbags at the top were 3 sunrises. And if that's the case, that would almost make sense, because then like a picture of an Assyrian holding that would be like holding of astronomical knowledge. Like this symbol could have been a symbol of knowledge of astronomy. Which is one thing, honestly, about Göbekli
That
Tepe.
book bag.
The book,
Right? It kind of makes sense. They probably had to travel around with their books.
So here's the thing. That pillar, that's just one pillar of 200. And here we are debating. We don't even know what it is. It's all conjecture.
Hold it up, James. You can see what that pillar looks like.
So this Göbekli Tepe situation is far more bizarre than we've described so far.
I think the logical explanation, though, is that you have massive tourist revenue coming to see it as is. Why spend more money and excavate these things?
I think that's
This
the
is
most.
the pillar.
I think that's the most logical explanation, but it could be more insidious than that, because
So that's one pillar.
that's pillar 43, the most debated one of them all, and there's approximately 128 more pillars that are still buried in the earth.
What's that bird doing in the earth?
Dr. Martin Sweatman, his first paper on Göbekli Tepe's pillar 43, he's got Scorpio on the bottom. He believes that's Sagittarius, that's the sun, and if that's one. Basically, it's a star map denoting the time that the comet smacked the Earth with his is what he believes. Each one of those V's, his latest paper on it, each one of those V symbols is a day. Each one of, in his opinion, each one of those boxes is a month. And there is basically a full year denoting the whole thing the way he broke. That's very interesting stuff. And one of the things that's wild to me when we talk about like the lack of further excavations is almost every pillar we bring up has new symbols, new iconography. If we're trying to find some sort of ancient proto-language or something, we need more symbols. We need more things on Earth, sure.
Yeah.
And that's completely opposed by the mainstream archaeology. The idea that these guys have any sort of written language is fucking ridiculous.
But what are the theories involved in? I know it's been theorized that it was purposely covered.
It really looks like it. If you look at pictures of the excavation, it looks like it was all piled in with stones and dirt, because if it was some sort of natural event, it would have destroyed the pillars. The pillars are preserved. So it wasn't just blown in with dust. If you look at it, it's gravel, and like as Graham Hancock has explained, that Klaus Schmidt, the original excavator of the site before his untimely passing in 2014, the people that worked the site believe it was intentionally buried. That is debated in academia today.
But isn't there also carbon isotope dating of the ground soil that shows it's the same age throughout the entire whatever feet it is of the dirt
Yes,
that's covering it?
and so it's very apparent that it was purposely buried. And what's interesting about that is that it coincides exactly with the Younger Dryas climate catastrophe. So if you want an alternative idea we can talk about no, because it would destroy those pillars.
And knock them over.
Yeah, I've seen that in Iraq with the statues. So we'll just talk about this in a second. So this is where things get wild. So
That's before the excavation. This is an aerial photo from what year is this?
that should be 2004. Or actually, no, excuse me, that was before 1994. They started excavations in 1994, 1995.
So that is when it was just dirt. Everybody thought it was just a regular hillside, which is makes you wonder how more.
Well, they're finding dozens of other sites around Turkey.
Oh, yeah,
that are even
all over the
older.
place.
And
Even older.
yes. So let me tell you a few different things about the Göbekli Tepe. When you bring up pictures of the pillars, notice how they all annotate animals on them.
Yeah.
Now, this is a fun topic, and I have a few other things to share. One of which is that if you want to talk about reasons not to excavate it, I'll give you two possibilities. And this is just conjecture. I don't know what the answer is. Let me say this up front. But part of it could have a religious implication as well as a climate change implication. Let me start with that. So we know it is an established fact that the Younger Dryas climate catastrophe happened between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago. We know that there was vast changes in weather patterns throughout the northern hemisphere. The only part of it that's debated, and as well as near extinction events or extinction events of many different mammals in North America, but what we know is that something happened. Whatever it is what's debated. Whether it's a cosmic impact, whether it's a pole shift, whether it's sun cycles, all kinds of conjecture all the way around. But when I mentioned the WEF, they are the biggest proponents of the man-made climate change narrative. They're the ones that want to get rid of gas-powered stoves. They want us to get rid of vehicles. They are pushing their initiatives around the world, and they believe that we're destroying the planet. I'm not saying they're entirely wrong, but I don't agree with their ways of going about it, but that's a side point. But here's the thing. When you look at the legend of Noah's flood, Noah's Ark and the flood, so I'm not suggesting that there was a flood that covered every mountain on Earth, and nor am I suggesting that there was a boat that housed every species of animal on Earth. However, if Noah's Ark existed, many believe that it was crashed onto Mount Ararat, which is also in Turkey. And something fascinating is that in the Bible, in Genesis 8:20, some of the first verses after Noah emerged from the flood is that he was said to have constructed an altar to the Lord where he sacrificed some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird. Göbekli Tepe is in Turkey, and every single one of those pillars annotates animals. And some have suggested that it could be Noah's altar. Now, that could be one reason why they don't want to excavate it, is because Turkey is an Islamic country, and if there was some Christian religious belief that was corroborated, they might not want that to happen. Another possibility is that the site itself might corroborate the Younger Dryas climate catastrophe. And when we're in a time frame where they don't like talking academics, they don't like talking about cataclysms. They want to pretend they didn't happen. They want everything to be man-made climate change. They don't ever talk about the Sahara being green 5,000 years ago, like when you're talking about Egypt being the rainforest.
They find whale bones in the Sahara.
No, Joe, those are 30 million years old, so stop talking about it.
It's amazing when you think about it.
Yeah. And so, as far as the climate change narrative, there could be a possibility that they don't want the evidence of a prehistoric civilization that was more advanced than what we ever thought to believe, that might corroborate some Christian narratives. And if nothing else, they don't want it to be brought into the discussion of modern day climate change, because notice on the topic of climate change, they never mention natural stuff. They don't discuss the Milankovitch cycles, which consists of three variables, one of which is the Earth's precession, the other is the Earth's tilt, and the other is the distance from the Earth from the sun. All three of those variables are constantly changing every single day, although immeasurable day by day. They happen over tens of thousands of years. But each individual of those variables impact climate on Earth. For example, when I talk about the Green Sahara, they believe the most likely reason has to do with the Earth's precessional cycle. I'm like, well, wait a second. Where's this in the conversation of modern day climate change? If we're talking about us destroying the planet, I would just like an answer as far as where these three variables are in the conversation.
Did you see the Washington Post's very inconvenient data that they published about the temperature of Earth?
No, please tell
If
me.
you find the Washington Post climate study, they found that we're in a massive cooling period. If you go back,
Yes.
X amount of 100,000 years, and you look at like what's happening to, it goes in cycles, but that's what it looks like now.
Right? So,
Countries Earth's climate over the last 485 million years. Look at the dip we're in, and look how it's never static. It's down and up and down and up and down and up all throughout the history of the Earth, which is measurable. It's not to say that we don't have an impact on it. We definitely do.
Pretty sharp increase there.
But here's the thing: even if we didn't, but there's sharp increases in
There's
the
a couple
past.
other ones.
Look at those guys.
Look
Look at 390 million years ago. Look at that giant peak. That's fucking crazy. That's straight up and down.
Yep.
It's always happened. It's not like it's static, and then industrial engineering comes along, and then you see this big increase. Oh boy, what are we doing with the Earth? No, it's like even if we didn't do anything, we have no control over the temperature of the Earth. And what's really terrifying, Brandon Carlson talks about this all the time, is global cooling. That's what's really terrifying. When global warming happens, oh no, you got to move out of Malibu. You're going to be okay. You got to move to places where it used to be cold, and now it's warm because humans have always been nomadic. That's the whole reason why we're not happy anymore. It can kill us all. Right. So what we're killing will kill. Global cooling will kill everything. And we became, Randall talks about this, that we came very close at one point in human history. We came very close to losing the oxygen that's required to literally keep life.
Jamie, we bring up like Ice Age or Ice Holder. So I have an update from you from the last time I was on your podcast. Go over to the graph, one of the first slides, and it that one. Go right, hang out right there for a second. So when I was on your show last time, Joe, I said something very specific where I said, I think this is what my exact words. I think the data might indicate that cold is more often than it's hot. Do you know what happened after that? I was going to send this to you, but I held off because you've seen enough hit pieces. So there was a hit piece done on me by Media Matters, which was funded by George Soros, and their networking of Fox and other. They did this hit piece on me to say that Jimmy Corsetti was on Joe Rogan spreading climate change denial and inaccurate information. The only thing, if you could bring that back up, Jimmy, please. The only thing that I said wrong is that I said the data might indicate that the Earth is cold more often than hot. Excuse me, no. The data absolutely definitively shows that Earth is cold more often than it's hot. And what you're looking at here is straight out of the Utah Geological Survey. It's prestigious. It's found at the top of Google. And what you're looking at here is data from the last 450,000 years, corroborated from data taken from ice core samples from Antarctica as well as Greenland. And what it shows is that not only are we in the middle of a 3 million year old ice age, there's something called glacials and interglacials. Glacials are where it's cold and the glaciers grow. Interglacials are where things warm and glaciers recede. What you're seeing here is 4, arguably 5 interglacial periods over just the last 450,000 years. Never mind hundreds of millions of years ago. What it shows is that the periods of cooling last 7 to 9 times longer than interglacials, which are periods of warming. And here's the fun part. Interglacials last anywhere from 10 to 30,000 years, and our warming started 11,600 years ago, which means that we're already in the window for potential catastrophe for things to start cooling again. So when I was on your show last time and I was mentioning Elon Musk talking about ice ages being a deep, deep rabbit hole, do you remember that? He was talking about it? Well, I know what he's talking about. It's this. It means that we're already in the window where things could start cooling again, and when it does, we're in a lot of trouble. I think that I can't speak on his behalf. I've got to tell you, next time, can you just text him and ask him if he thinks it's related to pole shifts? I need to tighten up my study on this because because let me tell you something. Let me share something right now that you've never heard on this show before. You hear everyone talking about cosmic impact hypothesis. You hear people talking about sun cycles. Not a lot of people have been on here talking about pole shifts. Let me give a quick shout out to Ben Davidson of Suspicious Observers. I recommend maybe you link up with him. Nobody has researched the topic of pole shifts and sun cycles as much as him. And he brought something to my attention I had never heard before. Jamie, the very first slide that you showed was of the Gothenburg excursion. So there was a partial pole flip right in the middle. See how it dates between 13,007 and 12,003? So the Younger Dryas started 12,800 years ago. And it's right in the middle of that ballpark range. We already know it is established science that when geomagnetic pole excursions happen, it changes weather patterns on Earth, as well as the ocean current. Jamie, if you want to Google, there's a space.com article titled that in 2025, some scientists are suggesting that the Earth's ocean currents may stop. Have you heard this? Okay. And nowhere in the articles do they mention anything about pole excursions. So people need to understand that we're already in the middle of a pole excursion, which is a partial pole flip, which means that things are shifting inside the Earth. It's also known that that can cause changes in ocean current. Now, most mainstream articles, let me just be fair and tell you what they'll say. They'll say that, oh no, it's related to man-made climate change. We're changing the currents of the ocean. I don't believe that. But don't allow them to take your data. Look at this. Nowhere in this article do explain why. But here's the thing. People need to understand that the number one thing that affects weather on Earth is, of course, the sun. The second thing is ocean currents. It's the reason why England is relatively temperate.
Go back to that channel.
It's the reason why England is relatively temperate is because the Gulf Stream flows up there and it keeps it relatively warm.
The way it says the key Atlantic current could collapse soon, impacting the entire world for centuries to come. Leading climate scientists warn. So just by saying climate scientists, you're already implying at least this is the result of climate change.
Right, that's what
which further fuels this agenda that man-made climate change is the cause of all of our woes.
Right,
Which is a narrative that you're consistently hearing. And again, to be real clear, someone's going to say something about this is not to dismiss pollution. This is not to dismiss our impact on the atmosphere of the Earth and what we're doing with coal plants, all the bullshit that we're doing. For sure, we're doing bad things. Right? Also, if we weren't, we have no control of this thing. Right. This thing is constantly moving, and both of those things need to be looked at the same time. The problem is this whole narrative of climate science has been adopted by these same fucking people that want Twitter pronouns. It's the same people, it's the same thing, and if you have anything to say about it, if you want to talk about a swastika being an ancient symbol, now you're a Nazi. Now you're a climate denier, you're a vaccine denier, you're this, you're that, you're a Holocaust denier. It's like the same kind of stupid shit. And unfortunately, with this one is uniquely tied to money. This one is uniquely tied to green agendas and the enormous amount of funding that is going towards these green agendas and people that are profiting off of spreading this narrative. These philanthro capitalists that are making hundreds of millions of dollars promoting this idea of climate change being our primary problem. And if you deny it, you're a science denier.
And the reason why you should listen to these people is because they're leaving out the key data involving Earth's historical climate data.
Yes.
They're not including all these other details.
Right.
And so I think people need to look at pole shifts because it's very interesting in this alternative realm that you have people that are proponents of the cosmic impact hypothesis. You have Dr. Rothschild with the sun cycles. You have other people talking about pole shifts. I think people should consider that all the above are correct, and let me explain why. When pole shifts happen, Earth's shields are diminished. We're in the middle of a pole shift right now. The Earth's shields are diminishing, and it's been happening since the 1800s. It's been accelerating over the last few decades. This is scientific data. The North Pole is shifting at like almost 40 miles a year, when it was half that just a decade ago. And when the Earth shields diminish, we are more susceptible to cosmic impacts because this is real. It's happening.
I had no idea. I thought it was feeding you.
Now, the mainstream will say, "Don't worry, it's still another 1,000 years away." I'm like, they actually can't prove that because we've never been alive to document a pole shift. But what I'm trying to say is that we should consider the pole shifting. Rather ask Elon Musk his thoughts on this sometime.
Well, he actually just tweeted something about it recently.
What did he say?
He tweeted something about the magnetic poles.
Oh my God!
Yeah, he tweeted something about.
I think he actually retweeted the
core of the Earth.
what's his face? I forget his name, but you were just
Ben Davidson?
Ben Davidson. I'm pretty sure he retweeted Ben Davidson.
Oh, we need to find that out if that's the case. Because here's the
He
thing.
tweets so much though. It takes so long
I know.
to go through his tweets. I don't know.
He does it too much. It's less effective because I'm like, I miss stuff. And I follow him closely, actually. There you go. Look at this.
Which a vast ball of molten rock, Earth's core, which generates most of our magnetic field, is 85% iron and moves independently from the surface plates, which is why the magnetic pole changes position.
I love Brian Lamelli. If I'm saying his name right, we followed each other. He's a great guy. I think Elon Musk is giving a hint here because you remember how the northern lights were visible as far south as Mexico recently in the last few months?
That was from solar activity, right?
Right, but the reason why it's more visible now is because the Earth shields are diminishing. This isn't like from Bob's website. This is mainstream science. Again, Ben Davidson has taught me a lot on this, and he was actually on with Alex Jones not long ago, and he really blew Alex Jones's mind. He vetted him, and So what I'm trying to say here is that like this is not being brought into the equation of man-made climate change
Right.
at all.
Well, because of all the things we were talking about, the educators want to be the only ones that distribute the information, and they don't want to look at the full picture. They only want to look at this one thing for the greater good of all of us. It's better if you just get people to only focus on getting an electric car.
Right.
Well, like I've always, ever since I started doing this stuff, I've had people that are like, "Hey, man, you fact check scientists. We want you in the climate change debate." And I've always had the opinion of like, look, I'm talking about big old rocks. There's zero skin in the game. And if I'm wrong about that, nothing changes. But if I'm wrong about climate change, I get a bunch of people. I feel a little like it's
not your area of
it's not my area of expertise, and there's too much skin in it. But when I did the debunking of Flip Dibble's debunking of Graham, the part about the metallurgy, I spoke with an ice core specialist. And now there ain't but a handful of these dudes on the planet. Literally just a handful.
That was a very important part of your debunking.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that.
You're the guy that blew the roof on that.
Yeah.
You're the guy that contacted firsthand.
Let's explain what you did.
Well, I spent an hour on a Zoom chat with you because what Flynn had said was that there was no proof of metallurgy in the ice age. And well, of course, there's no proof of it, but he said that we can prove definitively there was no metallurgy. And that's where it's like, well, no, because they looked for levels of lead, and levels of lead, that graph you just showed with the interglacial periods, lead follows that. Because when there's more dust on the ground, the reason they believe is there's more dust on the ground, more gets kicked up, more ends up in the glacier. But that's the same dirt that would be kicked up if they were digging for iron, right? So either way, you're going to end up with more lead in the glacier. So I talked to this ice core specialist for an hour on Zoom, and I'm like, man, so flesh this out for me, explain to me. So he explains to me how they determine whether or not lead's from an anthropogenic origin or if it's natural, and that's based on if there's an archaeological site that they can match the other isotopes to. He went through all the troubles with it. He even lamented having, he's got other people in his field that are hardcore anti-pseudoscience because their climate change deniers are dealing with it. So he's like, some of these guys are just too zealous, overzealous with it. I get where you're coming from. Then I put the video out, and Flint contacts you, and next thing you know, well, I didn't exactly say it, but he doesn't change what he says. He just kind of implies that I wasn't quite being accurate. He doesn't give it full anything. It's just, it makes it vague all of a sudden, and it quite clear. He was pressured. Well, fucking archaeologist. He's a climate scientist. Why do you care? Because they're all part of the same little keyboard warrior. Yeah, even cult numbers. Yeah, and that right there changed my attitude on it. Like, but it changed my attitude on the whole global warming thing. I was like, that's probably accurate. And I was like, I don't fucking know. I'm going to dig into this stuff because I don't trust these sons of bitches anymore. I know that if somebody pressured him from upstairs, he would have crumpled like a bat because he sure did when Flint pushed it.
So the issue is that it's not like there's one explanation that could conceivably have caused this massive cataclysm. There's probably a lot of variables. Just like there's always been. I mean, we always like to conveniently ignore supervolcanoes. When one of those blows, the whole world's fucked. The country's dead. Everyone's fucked.
You should consider the possibility that that's related to pole shifts as well. And I can give you a point. There's one that happened. I've heard you talk about before the Toba super eruption. Yeah. Did you know that happened at the same time of a geomagnetic pole excursion?
Oh,
it's true.
Makes sense. You ever know this movement?
There's movement inside the Earth. A full pole shift is when they believe that the innermost portion of the molten within the Earth core shifts. A geomagnetic pole excursion is a partial pole shift, which they theorize is related to the outer portion of the mantle. The Earth's crust sits on top of molten everything, and when that shifts, it shifts our compasses, and it's not unreasonable to suggest that when something shifts inside the Earth, it would affect things on the surface. I touched on this in the last time I was on, but when it comes to earthquakes, as an example, some originate in the crust, which is like 28 miles at its thickest, I believe, or on average, and others originate in the molten outer portion of the mantle. Well, if something shifts inside the Earth, why wouldn't it cause issues on the surface, whether it's earthquakes or volcanic activity? And some volcanic activity involving supervolcanoes coincides with the geomagnetic pole excursions. And so when I was on your show last time talking about pole shifts along with the ice ages, that was part of the same topic. Why is it that Media Matters, funded by George Soros, decided to do a hit piece on Jimmy Corsetti, the YouTuber? Brother, they came after me hard on this, which to be honest, I relished over. I was like, this is hilarious. I'm like,
well, they don't understand. It's actually good publicity.
It is, and it makes me feel like Right. And it makes me feel like I'm over the target because what's that saying about getting most flack when you're over it? So, like, I'm like, it makes me think that I'm onto something because nowhere in any of these climate change topics, as far as like the narratives on it, do they mention anything natural involving whether it be pole shifts. They sure as hell don't bring up the Great Sahara. They don't bring anywhere into the equation. They don't bring up the scientific fact that the Earth was warmer 4,000 years ago. There's Nobel Prize laureates that have been speaking out about this. There's two of them. Dr. Clauser and there's another gentleman I'm going to draw a blank on the top of my head. But, like, they've shared this data. This is scientific fact, and they're getting shunned and ridiculed for it.
Yeah, the problem is there's a consensus that's been politically accepted, and it's been talked about so much. It's a political talking point, and if they lose that political talking point, they lose a large percentage of their platform.
Oh yeah,
right. There's so many parts of the leftist platform that they need to have these narratives, and one of them is climate change, and that Donald Trump is a climate change denier. The right-wing people are climate change deniers.
Ergo science deniers, ergo racists.
It's very, 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 very stupid, and it's bad for all of us because I think we all need to have an understanding of how delicate our environment is and how delicate life on Earth is, and that it is this constantly changing thing that has never been static. We know that. We know about the dinosaurs. We know about all these different things. That we know about the Ice Age. But we don't truly have a comprehensive narrative that everyone accepts. It's become politicized.
Yeah.
And it's become politicized by the worst people because they're the cultists.
Yeah. They're the ones that not the only ones, but I'm a lot less political than a lot of people in this community. And I said it when COVID first started getting bad and you could see it on the internet, I was real quick to say, we're going to be fucking locked down for years, guys. And everybody's laughing at me, but it's like it's a political football. So either side is going to drop a square. We don't live in a society of political compromise anymore. We live in a society of give them an inch, they take a mile. The other side is going to concede one fucking inch on this, and we're going to be dealing with the same argument 3 years from now. And lo and behold, and
that's what's crazy about this is that data has become politicized. Science and data and knowledge has become politicized.
Over 80,000 papers were retracted last year. 80,000 scientific papers. The fact, like 60% of them were medical. The top 10 most still cited papers that have been retracted are all medical. The medical community is fucked right now from COVID. It turned in on itself and just started. And if you look at their papers and stuff, it's insane. They are all at each other's throats in all kinds of different ways, still citing retracted papers and all kinds of goofy little shit because it became a political football. We can see it on TikTok. You watch a nurse come out there and she's going to be doing a little TikTok and you can just look. Is that a donkey next to her name or an elephant? If it's an elephant, she's going to tell you there's nobody in this hospital. It's fucking empty. But the donkey, she's going to tell you about the body outside, the machine outside making cornstarch out of the fucking dead people that they can't bury them as fast as they're dying. It was so openly, easily for the average Joe could get right through it. Could just see if this is just an argument between the two parties. They just transferred this to the medical problem.
Well, you remember in the beginning days of the pandemic when they were really fear-mongering, when they gave a preposterous number of people that were going to die from COVID. And what was the percentage at the high point? Was it like 3.5% or something like that? Or was it 30%? It was something like, there's a compilation video, Jamie, see if you can find it, where they're dunking on Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump said, right, it's less than 1%. He was right.
He was totally
Quite
right.
a bit less than 1%.
He was right about the UV stuff, too.
But I think they were trying to say that it was 34%. I think that's what they're saying. It's 3.4 or 34. I can't remember which. But they were repeating it ad nauseum on television that this was going to be the death rate of people that got COVID. It's one of the things that justified the lockdowns. If it really was less than 1%, people go, so it's like, what's the flu? And you get into the flu, you go, well, what's the percentage difference? It's like 50% difference. Okay, what are we doing? Is it a bad flu? Is that what this is? This is like a bad flu. But you can't say that, or you're some kind of anti-science character. You're a terrible person. You're killing grandmas.
If you want to mix it up, Jamie, there's a video. So last time I was on, I mentioned a clip of Donald Trump talking about it's going to get cold again. And we couldn't find the clip at the time, but I have it in my folder, Jamie. It's just Donald Trump. It's in the front with all the other folders.
One step at a time. Let's try to find that video of them all repeating the same thing over and over again. It's Brian Stelter, a little weasel on CNN. constantly repeating the fact that Donald Trump doesn't know what he's talking about. He was right. He was absolutely correct.
Donald Trump doesn't just say things out of his butt like people make him out to be. I'm not saying he doesn't talk in that way. Okay.
He's very if you're a ranter, you run it's your podcast.
You run the risk of fucking up your ass every now and again.
He wasn't talking out of his butt with the UV killing off bacteria and viruses.
No, he just said it in a way that wasn't logical. He said, like, you get the light into your body. Yeah, you know what he's talking about. But no, they figured out how to get LED lights into lungs to kill viruses.
Yeah, and
Such a thing to look is checking in Donald Trump COVID compilation video gives me a bunch of
COVID, death rate is what's important. Death rate compilation versus the media. And because the media was the one that were dunking on it. They were coming up with this ridiculously high rate that turned out to not be accurate at all.
well, I think you have those people, the leftists or whatever you want to call them, the Flint Dibbles of the fucking world. These guys are, like we were talking about with climate change and everything else, they don't want to leave anything in there that could let the other side have it. They assume that the average rank and file Joe public is dumb as hell.
Right.
I mean, one of the things I'll always say about ancient apocalypse is things that would be like, well, he goes on there and he talks shit about archaeologists, and everybody's going to believe everything he says because it's so well made. It's like, man,
I didn't do that at all.
And in the first season, we did talk a little shit about archaeologists, but the bottom, to me, if I'm watching anything, I don't care what it is, if the person says, you know, mainstream scientists disagree with me here, but here's what I have to say, all my alarm bells go off, and that tells me I cannot hang my hat on what this motherfucker said. I got to go for war. Right? That's what Graham does over and over again. Mainstream archaeologists disagree with me. So for them to say everybody in the country is everybody in the world is going to believe this, it's nuts.
So it's 3.4%. So this is it. So give me some more.
And a lot of conversations with a lot of people that do is think the numbers are way under 1%.
To the fact check, the World Health Organization says the coronavirus death rate is 3.4%. President Trump lies that the World Health Organization is wrong.
The number is 3.4%. 3.4% is what it's being reported.
My boy Sanjay.
The death rate percentage is 3.4%, and no hunch from the president can change that.
Blackboard's most recent World Health Organization estimate for the global death rate of coronavirus is 3.4%.
Jesus.
The 3.4% death rate was wrong, and WHO data later updated it to a fraction of 1%. Oscar back in the history. Trump has a hunch that the death rate is lower than 1%.
Way under 1%.
The sole bit of mozzarella thinking is, that's not to do is about the mortality rate.
Way under 1%.
False information.
Spreading disinformation.
Disinformation is dangerous. Disinformation.
If the president likes it, you're the world's greatest scientist that we're supposed to do. Listen to that. Leading scientists, including Dr. Fauci, wrote in the New England Journal of Medicine that the death rate could be considerably less than 1%.
Way under 1%.
Why? See, we've seen enough. These people are fucking puppets, man. They're puppets, and they willfully, gleefully repeat these narratives.
Yep.
And instead of saying, well, where did you get that information? Who are you talking to? Let's find out if that's correct. Why does the World Health Organization think it's 3.4%? Is there any nefarious intent behind this whole idea of it killing everybody that's forcing some enormously profitable venture, like forcing everybody to take these fucking new vaccines you guys developed? Like, could that be factored in? Maybe. Well, no, you only hear that it's factored in once everybody's profited and got out, including Bill Gates.
Yeah.
Bill Gates was on television telling everybody to get the vaccine, you won't get COVID, and then afterwards, it didn't work. After he had unloaded all the stock, it wasn't effective, and it turns out COVID wasn't as bad as we thought it was. Well, you guys are really responsible for a bunch of people taking a medication that's unproven. You're responsible for all the side effects. You're responsible for all this, and you're responsible for fear-mongering, lying, closing down businesses, ruining economies, changing the political structure of the country.
They need to be held to account. I'm not going to forget this, and a lot of other people. When people's lives were destroyed, and it is. I mean, there needs to be a reckoning.
Elon recently said that his pronouns are still prosecute Fauci.
I love it.
He has a real possibility of making an impact.
Yeah. Oh yes, he does.
You need to listen to that.
Yeah.
Well, when it comes to the economic side of it, I honestly think out of everything, doing, the jab notwithstanding, just strictly from a top-down perspective,
Yes.
those guys, I mean,
It's most immense transfer wealth.
Fuck. Amazon, Walmart, eBay, all these motherfuckers cleaned house. And you know what shut down Spokane? We lost White Elephant. This guy had started in the 40s after World War II. He would buy surplus and put it in the store. He had fishing lures for 30 cents, fucking Transformers from the 80s. You know, I was buying 2,000 sold on eBay. Had all kinds of shit there. And he went out of business because he had to close his doors. Everything. You can't even
Restaurants
go
in California.
you can't even go to fucking Walmart at 2 in the morning like we did. Like everything's closed now at a certain time compared to where it was. Everything's
Well,
changed.
it's important because the coronavirus doesn't stay up.
It's a
Yeah.
stay up. That's right.
Sleep. And it doesn't exist when you walk to your table
Well,
and sit down.
all the homeless people need a place to hang out, so Walmart parking lot too. Yeah,
Yeah.
they show up.
I meant that actually the opposite. Coronavirus comes out of night. But it doesn't even. Like, the whole thing was so dumb because then they allowed Black Lives Matter protests. Like, what about 6 foot distancing? Everybody's breathing. They're screaming.
And
They're all yelling down the street. And you guys think that's not going to spread it?
Right.
and the brain dead stuff behind the symbolism. I talked about this a long time ago on the channel. The person that thought of, oh, we're going to have this band play. Let's get them masks that have a big hole in it to show solidarity with those in the audience. That's what the fucking is. It's like everybody's just going to look at that and be like, I'm not people swimming, so we don't need
Oh
that.
my
I'm
God.
going to swim with masks on.
It hurts me to see those clips. Now, COVID was one of the biggest IQ tests out
Oh, man.
in modern times.
Well, it was really a compliance test.
Yeah,
That's what it was.
It was a lot of complaints.
And check to see how many cowards there are out there that even though they know something to be true, are terrified of the blowback, so they don't speak about it. And when you do speak about it, you do get attacked. You know, I obviously experienced that, and I was fascinated by it. I mean, it was kind of horrifying to watch, but also fascinating. Like, oh, this is real. Like, you guys are just completely all lock in step and all full of shit. And you don't even care that I got better quick.
Brought to you by Pfizer.
Yeah.
And you can watch how the world, you can see this from a world perspective too. Different communities all around the world react differently. I remember lots of people, oh, why can't we do like Korea and Japan? And almost everybody's wearing a mask over there, and they do all this reporting and all this stuff. Like, you ever been there, man? You ever talked to any Koreans or Japanese people? Their fucking culture is lockstep compared to ours. They are very much, there's no counterculture in those communities. There's counterculture people are out of jail. You have one community. So yeah, they're told to do this, they fucking do it.
Well,
We don't do that.
our media is so compromised, so obviously compromised. And, you know, Callie Means has a really good point about this. He was saying that the reason why they spend so much money advertising on cable news is not because it's effective. It's because once they do that, now cable news cannot criticize them. It's so much smarter. Because it's like, listen, we're spending all this money just to make sure that you guys toe the line. That's what they're doing. So the news is not the news. It's only the news if an advertiser agrees that it's the news.
Yeah.
And that's not good.
No, it's
That's
really
not
bad.
good for anything. Left wing, right wing. If you think that somehow or another money gives a fuck about your political persuasion, it's so stupid that it got attached to a political ideology. And from the most compliant of people, those are the ones who are the most willing to along with the narrative. Because the consequences on the left of coloring outside the lines, they attack you so hard, they crush you so hard with this order made situation. Or anything where you're stepping outside the line and talking about it. So, like what you experienced just discussing something that turns out to be absolutely correct. They fund a big hit piece value, which essentially acts as an advertisement for you.
Right.
It just builds your
It's the
channel.
Streisand effect.
And then people will just go to your channel and go, this guy's great. This fucking show's awesome. This is interesting information and just undeniable facts. The undeniable facts. Like that no one can discuss. No one can debate in any way, shape, or form the actual size of these stones. Where they came from. This is not under debate. So just the undeniable stuff is unbelievably fascinating. And then when they go to your channel, they go, where's all the Nazi shit? I'm like, this guy's a Nazi. I'm like, where's the Nazi shit? I'm just getting facts.
You know, we should go back to Tepe, Benang Penang, and the Great Pyramid because there's some more stuff involving archaeology and lack of excavations that are actually pretty significant. So going back to Göbekli Tepe, one of the photos that Jamie that you showed earlier was before excavations began, and you noticed that there was no trees there. Right. So one of the controversies is that there's some 800 trees that were planted on the site a full decade after excavations began, and the trees are buried were planted on top of ancient ruins, which stands to not only destroy the ruins, but also highlights that they can't excavate what's underneath them, but the trees are there. And so here's the before and after.
So what's the conventional explanation for why they planted all these trees over a site that they know is filled with ruins underneath it?
So when this was a property owned by farmers, and the Turkish government wanted to purchase the land for them, and the owners felt that they were being lowballed. So what they did was they planted olive trees on top of the site in order to increase the value of the land, which for me, when I first heard this, I'm like, I don't understand, this doesn't make sense to me. Göbekli Tepe is already priceless. The world's oldest and most mysterious ancient site on Earth, it's priceless. Now, to be fair, and Dan, you've harped on this, and I agree with you.
It's government stuff. If the feds are going to buy your land for a highway, they don't care what's underneath it, or it's in burial ground or what. It's what's this land worth. In this city, it's this kind of property. So they made it an orchard instead of a desert.
Now, here's the thing, though. Of all things, they planted olive trees, and there's something that was enacted. It's called the Olive Law in Turkey in the 1930s, where it's illegal to cut down olive trees in Turkey. So I'm like, well, that's interesting.
And let me ask you this real quick. Imagine being the owner of that property, and you've got found these ruins here. You've got all these people coming out. They're paying you money to check shit out. You're selling all kinds of stuff, and now the government's going to take it from you. You've had it for 10 fucking years. Now the government's saying it's theirs. So you go out and start planting trees. Now, when you dig a hole to plant that tree, you find an artifact. Do you put that in the pile of artifacts to hand to Klaus Schmidt, or do you put that in the pile to sell to the antique collector that's not going to tell anybody? Obviously, you put it in. He's pissed off. My opinion is that guy sold a ton of fucking artifacts while that was going on. Why wouldn't you?
Now, are there artifacts connected to Göbekli Tepe?
Yeah, they find stuff.
What kind of stuff?
No pottery or anything. But they have found one of the biggest things is a bunch of chunks of stone. To archaeologists, even, and they call it microchip, which would be like a tiny little piece you get from. That's still technically an artifact.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of that kind of stuff. There are a lot of bones that have been charred, things like that. But there's nothing too terribly amazing. Nothing too crazy. But again, that's the kind of stuff that would possibly do. I don't know. That's where my skepticism can get a little cynical. I'm in the opinion if the Antikythera mechanism would have been identified as what it is, but pulled it out of the ocean, it would have never made it to a museum. That there was somebody. I was telling Jim last night, we were having dinner. If the reports of giant bones that you see in the 1930s from guys that were over in New Mexico and then they're bringing them back to the Smithsonian, they just never made it there. If they really did find giant bones, which I'm skeptical of, but if they did, this is probably an advertisement to sell them while they're traveling these things across the country. This happened to lose them along the way. This dude came over and bought them. This has been a problem since day one,
especially when you think about those kind of crazy old school Rockefeller type millionaires.
Yeah.
Who really love to control information, everything. If you have access to something that's just undeniably throws the whole timeline into a question or throws a narrative for human beings to question.
Now you got some power with that. So you see, I'm of the opinion that that's been a problem. Like, I don't believe in the Dendera line. I assume you know what the Dendera line is.
Listen, when you glossed over the Antikythera,
I say the Antikythera.
That one is fast.
It's crazy, ain't it?
That is, how old is it?
It's like 2,000 years old.
2,000 years old. It's a hand-carved brass machine that you use it tracks the cycles of the moon, the Earth, and different planets in our solar system.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And they didn't know what it was they found. It was like some corroded up gears. And then they start doing some sort of I don't even know how they did it, how they understand all the different pieces of it, because it's all corroded together. But they use some sort of scanning mechanism, correct? And see if you can find what it actually looks like.
But you can buy replicas of it nowadays. They make little boxes of
That's
it.
what it looked like when they found it.
Yeah.
But now, show what it looks like when they've done a scan of it.
I found it. The heap of dead naked people.
Whoa. Conversions see shaking in fear and mumbling about a heap of dead naked people. It was among a group of Greek divers from the eastern Mediterranean island of Simi who were searching for natural sponges. They had sheltered from a violent storm near the tiny island of, how do you say it again? Antikythera, between Crete and mainland Greece. When the storm subsided, they dived for sponges, chanced upon a shipwreck full of Greek treasures. The most significant wreck of the ancient world to have been found up to that point. The dead naked people were marble sculptures scattered on the seafloor, along with many other artifacts. Soon after, the discovery prompted the first major underwater archaeological dig in history. So see if you can find what this mechanism looks like, what it actually looks like.
There's a replica.
Yeah, so this is the replica of this thing. This incredible piece of engineering from 2,000 years ago, where all these gears and all these planets, and you could figure out where everything was. How? How'd they do this? How'd they do this? And this is beyond what we ever thought was available.
But no, there is a YouTube channel. A guy goes through. I forget his name, but he does go through. He makes one of these with old school tools. But he's making each gear by hand. He's making the wire by hand. That's dork. He's a dork. Yes. It is the greatest.
Bring him on the show.
Greatest possible version of a dork. I mean,
but it is fun to watch. But it's
incredible.
But at the end of the day, that's interesting to be able to recreate it. But the planning of the thing, that's really where the engineering matters.
And then you have to take into consideration, what is this based on? What knowledge was available back then that we did not think was? So we're talking about 2,000 years ago. This is the time of Christ. We did not think that they had any kind of machines that were in any way similar to that thing. What else don't we know?
Right?
What else is lost? How much of that stuff is gone? Like if this is 2,000 years ago, it's that corroded. What is 10,000 years to it? Right?
Oh, the dust of the bottom.
Right.
And the fact that you found it above the oceans in America itself.
And this is what's important to understand. And this is another lie that Frank Dibble told about the number of shipwrecks that have been found. And not only that, but what would be left over after just a few thousand years. And that when they find these 1,000-year-old shipwrecks, they don't find any wood anymore. You just find the pottery. So you just know where the shipwreck is because there's a bunch of gold on the ground and some pots. But if you go back 10,000 years before that, how much has the surface of the floor of the ocean shifted? How much of that stuff has been covered up? How much is it? 10,000 years is so long. Now, what if it's 20,000? What if it's 30,000? To say we don't know is the correct thing. It's the correct thing to do, and that's what nobody wants to do.
There's a hypothesis. It's more of a like a mental. I forget the name of what you call it, like a mind teaser, like a way to make your brain think. It's called the Silurian hypothesis. The Silurians are a Doctor Who monster that supposedly lived on Earth like millions of years before humans. Wake up one day and they find all these monkeys running around and they decide they don't like us. But the hypothesis is, how would you determine if there was a species or an advanced civilization that lived on the Earth a million years, 5 million years? As soon as we have fossil fuels, as long as we have the first bit of oil had been created on the planet, you could have a civilization like ours. So what would you look for? The only conclusion is maybe nuclear stuff. If they tested like maybe nuclear power plant, we might still find some radioactive material. But beyond that, not a goddamn thing. After 10 million years, you can find a fucking bit of it. And that's what their conclusion is. And this is a scientific thing. This is something that's a thought tool. That's what it's called. It's something that they use in science, in archaeology and history and stuff, presumably, to look at that problem. But these guys obviously didn't do that. Like I said, he thinks people are stupid. He said right here on the in this room, it doesn't matter how long something's underwater. You might think that it matters how long something's underwater, but it really doesn't. Are you fucking kidding me? Of course, anybody knows that. This is basic
just in terms of whether or not you're going to find it. Right? They haven't done like a comprehensive LiDAR scan of the bottom of the ocean floor. They just have not done that. That's not possible right now. But if they did do that, who fucking knows what they'd find out there?
Well, here's where things get nuts, is that here we are talking about things as far as tens of thousands of years. So we do have a site that Graham Hancock highlighted in season 1 of Ancient Apocalypse called Gunung Panang in Indonesia, and Jim may have a folder on this. So this pyramidal structure could potentially be 27,000 years old. It's hotly debated. But as Graham Hancock highlighted, there is a subterranean tunnel and chamber which may have those dates, and it's not being excavated. And a geologist, Danny Nanabajawa, I never pronounce it correctly, forgive me, Danny, but he is a geologist that analyzed the ground penetrating radar, and he said there's strong likelihood that it's man-made. Now, the skeptics, the academics will say, well, it's probably just a lava tube because the structure is volcanic in nature. But something interesting has happened. That back in 2014, the Indonesian government said that they were willing to allocate unlimited resources and funding to excavate the site. Something shifted a handful of years ago where they're not excavating it now. And as of today, there's no plan in place to find out what that subterranean chamber is. So if it was indeed man-made, we don't know. It could be natural, it could be man-made, but we're never going to know what it is until we go digging. And
Well,
right
what
now,
you know for sure is that people occupied the land above it after that.
100%. But 100% that is a man-made structure. It was volcanic in nature, but they terraced it. It's a pyramid-like structure. It's not a pyramid.
And we do have examples over and over again of truly ancient things, unexplainable things, where people built more crude versions above it.
All over the world.
The lava tubes, there are all kinds of places in South America where they have a pyramid built on top of a spring. The lava tube could have been a cave that was sacred that they just kept embellishing. Saying it's just a lava tube, not a man-made tunnel down there is a non sequitur. Anybody who knows anything about ancient history could understand how a sacred site could have a pyramid built on top.
Let's take a bathroom break.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so where were we?
Well, we're about the lack of excavations at Gunung Penang, and this should segue into something that's very, very interesting, which is the Great Pyramid of Giza. I've already said that Göbekli Tepe is arguably not just the oldest, but the most mysterious ancient site on Earth because it's not supposed to exist. However, the Great Pyramid of Giza, I would say, probably trumps it from the standpoint that it's just so mysterious, its sophistication, as well as the fact that we have no idea how it was constructed. And it's arguably the most debated structure in all of human history for two standpoints. One of which is that so many people debate on whether it was built to be a tomb for the pharaohs, or whether it was some sort of lost technology, had some other purpose, whether it's energy or whatever it may be, which is a fascinating topic. And I'll have a story involving me visiting it there with a certain person that really is, it's a story in itself. But let me say this. So there, back in 8 years ago, back in 2016, through Yuan technology, they discovered that there's a hidden chamber in the Great Pyramid, which is massive. Jamie, I have a folder on this, Great Pyramid Hidden Void. And it was established in 2017 through a scientific study. So we're talking discovered 8 years ago, corroborated 7 years ago in a study.
No Egyptologist debates it at all.
Is that a rough interpretation of the shape?
Yes, they don't know the exact shape of it. They have an approximate size and an approximate shape.
So now, many theorize that it is a second so-called Grand Gallery. It was originally thought to be 30 meters long. Now they have it at over 40 meters long, so almost 150 feet. And it is above the so-called Grand Gallery. And so when they first discovered it, Zahi Hawass came out of the woodwork and denounced it and said, this is nothing, and they said they're going to spend a few years debating with the international community on how to go about it. Brother, that was 7-8 years ago, almost rounding up to a decade. And as of today, there is no plan of any kind to go in and find out what's in there.
So they would have to go through the walls to get to it?
No, actually, brother, they could just drill a half-inch diameter hole, set a little tube camera through it, and we could figure out what's in there by the end of the week.
Get an endoscope right there. It's like when you go to the doctor.
And here's what's so important about this. We're talking about the most debated and arguably the most important structure in all of human history. Was it a tomb? Was it a lost technology? We have no idea how they even built it. That's the only thing that's more debated than that is how did the Egyptians construct the pyramid? So many theories have already been debunked on it. We just don't know how they did it.
2,300,000 stones that were supposedly all put in place within 20 years.
Right.
The 20 years part, I referred to that as like the gateway drug to becoming a pyramid. That's what you're saying. It's the stupidest fucking thing. Any guy who's ever stacked bricks for 5 minutes knows that is absurd. But and they just run with that because you can't. That's one of the weird things. Their written record is more robust to them than the actual science. Like the carbon dating for the pyramid and the written record are a couple hundred years off. All of the entire Fourth Dynasty, the carbon dating is a couple hundred years off. They just come up with some explanation for it and stick to that written record.
Well, my favorite is when they look at the hieroglyphs that depict pharaohs from 30,000 years ago. You're like, oh, that's all bullshit.
Yeah, but the one that a little further down, this is important shit here. But after then.
Why do you think that the 30,000 year mark is bullshit, but the 5,000 year mark is legit? That is really weird, guys. It is. Why are you conveniently ignoring all this other stuff while validating the more recent stuff?
Because it contradicts the textbooks they already wrote.
Contradicts the educators.
That dynamic, sorry, really quick, that dynamic, you mentioned Christopher Dunn. When he saw one of my recent videos about 2 months ago, me and him are going to start, he's going to come on my channel, and each artifact that he's covered, we're going to discuss one at a time. He knows I don't believe in ancient high technology, and he told me, basically, to summarize what he said, is that he is tired of having either yes men or cynics. He wants somebody that doesn't agree with him to sit down and have a conversation about these things, and they'll be honest, and we can actually get somewhere. And it was like the guy had been waiting 40 years for him. I have a fucking GED, and I work as an electrician. I should not be the one sitting in the chair next to the man. But all the people qualified to do it want to treat him like he's an idiot.
Right. And his theory is very fascinating. It's some sort of a power plant generating hydrogen, and it's feasible.
It's wild, and I gotta tell you, you know, when you walk through the Great Pyramid, there's nothing about it that resembles anything like a tomb. It seems like it was some sort of industrial function that had a function of some kind. So here's the story, and I have his permission to share it. So I had, you know, the only thing more wild than the topic of the mysteries of lost ancient civilizations is the diverse nature of people that are into this topic. So I had the pleasure of connecting with George St. Pierre, the GOAT, the great legendary UFC fighter. And because of him is how I went with him to Baalbek. He had unique connections. I was able to go with him and be connected, and then I went with him from there to Egypt. And we went inside the Great Pyramid. This was his first time in there. And we basically tipped the guard, I'll just say it. And we had the King's Chamber alone to ourselves for a few minutes. And we were with Yusuf Aliyan, who's the son of late Hakim Abdullah Aliyan, who is the mentor of John Anthony West. And he was in the Pyramid Code. And so George laid in the so-called sarcophagus, and Yusuf did the Om. I can't do it, but you do it with your throat, and he does inside the box. It makes the whole granite box vibrate. I've experienced it's wild. It feels, it's the reverberation off the stone. So he did that to George. George laid in it, and he did it for about a minute. And so George comes out of the box. His eyes were wide open, and he said, "Yeah, there he is." He said, "I'm coming out of retirement. I'm going to win the title." And he just started pacing around the room. So fast forward 3-4 hours later, I'm in a hotel pool with him. What year was it? Just last year, September of 2023. And just to clarify, at that time he was considering doing a grappling match. That's not what he was talking about. He was talking about winning the UFC World title again. So fast forward a few hours later, I'm at the hotel, the Mina House, Marriott hotel pool with the pyramids overlooking us. And I'm like, hey, George, you said you were thinking about coming out of retirement. And he's like, I love his accent. "No, Jimmy, I'm not coming out of retirement." And I said, "Well, what made you say that?" He's like, he thought about it. He's like, "It's just how I felt." So just to clarify, arguably the GOAT, although him and John Jones, they're comparable, just different, but the GOAT. And his first inclination out of coming out of the box with his eyes wide open was like, "I'm coming out of retirement. I'm going to win the title." And I asked him, and he's like, "No, I'm not going to do it. It's just how I felt in the moment." And I'm like, when people talk about it in the context of it being some sort of energy device, some people have speculated that with all these legends of humans living to hundreds and even thousands of years, some people have proposed that maybe it was DNA restoration. I have no idea what it was. I just don't think it was a tomb. I think it was something else. I think it was a functional structure of some kind. But the fact that someone like him, with his history and his accomplishments, the fact that that was the first thing that he felt coming out of that box after doing the reverberation thing is a story. Like, I don't know what to make of it.
I think that's normal.
Yeah?
Yeah. I think a guy like that has always got it in the back of his head.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, that's the highlights of his life. When he was conquering everyone in the welterweight division, he was the greatest fighter on planet Earth. It's the highlight of his life. So anytime he gets an elevated feeling, I'm sure that's one of the reasons why, like a lot of old fighters, they drink a lot or they do drugs. I think they're trying to, they experience highs that most people could never imagine. And I think whenever they experience a new high, some new thing, they get in their head, "I'm gonna fucking come back." And they want to chase that dragon. Or get in the ring with Jake Paul.
Sorry.
That probably had more to do with money. Yeah, but it's just this thing that just is in every one of those people.
Yeah, that makes sense. Although the fact that he's laying inside the Great Pyramid And you would almost think that'd be the furthest thing from his mind
No,
at the
it's
time.
an elevated experience. So, right? So it's an elevated experience. It makes him very excited. And when a guy like that is very excited, he thinks about the most exciting thing he's ever done. He's like, I'm going to fucking go do it again.
We got to get you in that box. We got to get you in the Gary
I'd like
Pyramid.
to go in the box. I'd like to go there. I really would. It's just a matter of carving out the time.
Right.
And I really have to do it. But especially, let's see what happens with the world. But,
Right.
So the world just keeps getting sketchier and sketchier in certain parts of the world.
Right.
Yeah, sadly. Yeah, sadly.
But-
It'd be nice.
Going back to the point of this hidden chamber,
Yeah.
like what is so?
Why would you not want to explore that?
It makes no feasible sense. Like, let's just say that, well, first of all, whether it was a tomb or something else, we could find out by going in there. Maybe there's maybe there's a pharaoh in there. Maybe we would instantly know that, okay, all this conjecture and debate is now been put aside. We know that there could be treasure
Well,
there.
it's fascinating for real.
And here's something else. A lot of conjecture as far as a lost technology. Could there be some sort of evidence of a tooling and how they constructed it? Could there be evidence of how it was constructed itself? Even if it's a completely empty room and nothing else, we still would have learned something new. In fact, I've joked to other people, like, hey, they could turn this into a pay-per-view event. I bet you 100 million people around the world.
Just thinking
But even if there's nothing in it, it's still a win because we will learn something new.
Yeah.
And it is, look, the academics will say, well, we don't want to damage the pyramid anymore. I'm like, okay, I respect that. But the thing is already a wreck. They used tons of dynamite to blast their way in it. The casing stones are all blown
They
off.
drill
The thing-
holes in all the rig.
Right.
It's
I don't so between go back to Tepe not being fully excavated, Gunung Padang, as well as the Great Pyramid, arguably the three oldest and most mysterious ancient sites on Earth, for some reason are not being appropriately excavated.
Isn't there a chamber underneath the Sphinx as well?
Well, it's common.
yeah, there's something there, but they're not. It's smaller. It's smaller, and Zahi a lot of stuff is built down. That's many little chambers down there. They're saying that there's supposed to be something more there, but that's dicey as far as what they know for sure.
They have never released any photos or video or of any kind of the Sphinx.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, just stick a camera in there with a flashlight and show us that there's nothing in there. Like,
Or just
That's
show
it.
us what is in
It's-
there. It shows the walls.
they say there's nothing in there. And I'm like, okay, well, show me what nothing looks like.
Right.
So, like, I'm just, look, I'm an outsider in this, and I have an
Well, you're
inquisitive
not.
mindset.
You're not. You're a human being on planet Earth, and you're a part of history.
And you know what? Every single person alive has an inherent right to know the true history of our origins, and I don't care what country you're born in, because people have come after me like, it is none of your business what's happening at Göbekli Tepe. You're not a Turkish citizen. And I say, excuse me, they elected for it to become a World Heritage Site. So they have thrown that out the window. It is everyone's. It surely is.
Sicilian. Sicilian. It doesn't make any sense. It's
We don't have any place to weigh in on Nazi Germany because you don't live in Germany.
it's the people of Earth. It's like we have a very fractured understanding of the history of the people on Earth. Göbekli Tepe is an excellent piece of evidence that points to that. We don't really understand why they did it or who did it. And there's probably more of those things out there that we missed. The Sahara Desert is the greatest example. Right? If they did some sort of very comprehensive examination of the Sahara Desert, like say, if technology advances to the point where they can do like some really comprehensive, like underground scanning of that entire part of the continent, who fucking knows that?
Only 5% of the Sahara has been studied as far as like say with the use of LiDAR technology.
Right.
They're using it from space, and they keep finding new structures that are prehistoric. They don't know who made them or when. And throughout the
They use
Sahara,
it from space.
yeah, it's
They use
called
LiDAR from space.
It's called archaeology from space, and they use satellites. So this is what's interesting is that they can use satellites with LiDAR to penetrate, like, I might be butchering this, but I want to say 10 meters. I could be off on that, but it's a substantial amount of depth from a satellite penetrating through dirt. I'm like, who would have thought that could even exist?
Right.
Pretty amazing.
It is.
We have good evidence that they didn't have that.
No, it's not.
I guess their orbit would decay.
Yeah, it fly back into
because ours did.
You know, a couple things about the thing worth mentioning. When they were excavating like that, the president was of the opinion, the same opinion that Dr. Dani Wajawa is, that like Nadi Wajawa wrote the book, even like Plato was right, that like Atlantis is in Indonesia. So the president of Java back then believed that was the case, and so he was throwing money in. When he lost his bid to be reelected in and somebody else took over. He was the one that shut everything down. He's in more lockstep with the archaeologists and stuff, the mainstream guys. So that's one of the reasons that there's a changing of the guard is why all of them just stopped. So one guy was into it, the next guy.
Well, let me. Okay, here we go. You just open up the window.
Yeah, there it is.
Here we go, Jimmy. So the WF conspiracy, it is nothing more than conspiracy theory. I am not at all convinced that there's something here with them trying to suppress ancient history. Let me be clear. But there is a correlation between what's going on at Göbekli Tepe and Gunung Padang, that the minister, so this is a government position, the Minister of Technology, Education, Research, and Technology, something along those lines, in Indonesia. This gentleman came into power, I believe, in 2018. His name's Nakim, or something Nakaram. I have a slide of him in my Gunung Padang thing. He's a global shaper within the World Economic Forum, and he is the head decision maker of excavations that would or would not happen, this gentleman, at Gunung Padang. Now, be clear, I'm not saying he's suppressing it. I'm not saying that the WF is trying to suppress our ancient history. All I'm sharing here is that it just so happens that the gentleman that's in charge of decision making, let me be clear, I said it earlier, they went from saying that there would be unlimited resources and funding to excavate Gunung Padang. It stopped. And as of right now, there's no plan in place to do it. And I'm just sharing that the person who would make that decision or has the power to do so happens to be a global shaper. And Klaus Schwab, the former head of the World Economic Forum, I have a video of him gloating about how they've infiltrated government cabinets, media all over the world, and are enacting their initiatives. Yes, so they infiltrated the cabinets. It's very good. You can see what.
Did you see the photo of him?
No, I would love to. No, please
There's a
show us.
photo of him in our bathroom here with the fucking crazy Darth Vader outfit on.
Oh, yeah. That was bizarre.
Wackiest fucking outfit ever. If you're, so on the nose.
I know.
You're an evil supervillain.
He looks like a Bond villain, James Bond villain.
More crazy than that. Like more crazy than a Bond. See if you can find that photo.
Yeah.
More crazy than a Bond villain, like a Star Wars villain.
Yeah.
Some,
He's a Sith Lord or
you don't have to
something.
be a crazy person to put that fucking thing on and go out in public unless it's a Halloween costume. It's a bizarre outfit for you to wear. And if everyone's worried about these secret societies and people that are in control and pulling the strings of the world, what are they worried about? They're worried about fucking crackpots that dress like this. That's what they're worried about. Eyes wide shut parties, like that kind of shit. You have that photo? It's fucking crazy.
And he wore it.
That photo right there. That's the one we have. Right. Yeah. In front of the podium. Wow. What is that fucking photo? What is that outfit you're wearing, sir?
That looks like something from some like 1970s dystopian film.
That's 100%. Like Metropolis or something.
Yeah. Death Race 2000, the original.
What the fuck is that? That outfit is so crazy. Imagine someone.
What's got to do with the event?
Oh, they all wore it.
He got an honorary doctorate. This is at a university somewhere
It's
in Europe.
fucking crazy that that's what you wear there anyway. What are you doing? You're dressing like a druid.
Well, even got a magic card.
It's so weird.
So again,
Look
going
at
back.
that other outfit. Look at that one.
That's okay. So when I look at Göbekli Tepe involving my little WF conspiracy idea, it is a bit bizarre that partnership with the Doges group was literally announced at the annual World Economic Forum meeting in Davos. And I also should share this, that I may have been banned from Turkey. So this is hilarious. So after my video came out, what's his name, Dr. Kurul? So the head of archaeology in Turkey took great issue with my conspiracy theories on it, and he was quoted in an article saying that I should be sanctioned, and then he followed up with like, I will be sanctioned. And I'm like, well, how are you going to keep me out of Göbekli Tepe? Have I been banned from Turkey? Because American citizens don't need a visa to go into Turkey unless they're going to be there more than 90 days. So if I could apply ahead of time. Like in Egypt, you can apply for your tourist visa ahead of time, and I know if I was rejected. That's what he said, is that I'll be sanctioned. He was referring to me, and I'm like, okay.
What does that mean?
Well, it means travel bans.
It means you're not going to enter the country.
It means I go to the airport and get rejected at customs potentially.
And that is possibly what would happen.
He said it would happen. I don't know that it's happened. Flights to Turkey are actually a little bit pricey, and I'm like, damn it. I'm like, if I'm going to land there and get turned around, that would suck.
Oh, you might be able to make a nice video about it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that would be actually, right. That's a video.
Sure. I mean, a big cop like helps you.
Right.
them to consider why they have chosen this. If it's just for economic reasons, which does make sense. There's so many people are already going there. Why should we spend more money? I get that.
Well, and it makes sense. It's the most likely explanation. It's probably true, but that means that then this is an issue of either mismanagement or incompetence because it is inexcusable that because as of right now, their plan is that it will not be fully excavated. It will not be fully excavated in any of our lifetimes. And there could potentially be answers involving our ancient past at Göbekli Tepe, and it is entirely inexcusable that we wouldn't dig it up. And I don't actually think it will take away from tourism by removing the mystery. Because people are 500,000 people a year are visiting it just because. And if they dig up more of it, in my opinion, that's more reason to go there.
Well, what did you just show, Jamie?
It's the article about the funding at
Yes.
it does say a thing about unlimited funding, but things it might have been also misinterpreted by translation. It's coming from the Jakarta Post. Talks about how soldiers were using hose to excavate. They didn't like that. It mentions the first disbursement of 250 grand was put out.
Is this from 2014?
It's the same article. It shows the thing that says unlimited amount of research funding, but it says it was taken from other funding, and then it says that there's a lack of funding right below it.
Archaeologists and other sites below the lack of funding.
Let me just say this. My ass. All they got to do is drill a hole and stick a camera through it into the tube to figure out if it's a lava tube or something man-made. This is not expensive. It could get done for thousands of dollars, not millions of dollars. And if it is a 27,000-year-old pyramidal structure, as Graham Hancock has proposed, the data is not proven. It's hotly debated. But let me just make this crystal clear. We don't know what it is. It could potentially be the oldest ancient ruin on Earth. And we're never going to know the answer until we go looking. And it is entirely unacceptable that we're not doing it.
Well,
What is happening?
There's a thing to get like less conspiratorial, but supported from a very real position. There's a thing with science with their paradigms. They've looked at it for a very long time. With the origins of Earth sciences and history, they were expected to bear out the Bible, prove the Bible right. Then evolution and Darwin, and then it was gradualism. Prove the Bible wrong. There is no major global flood. And gradualism, they assumed that everything happens slowly. There's nothing catastrophic in the record, and that lasted from the late 1700s all the fucking way up until 1980, when the KT dinosaur killing meteor was accepted. Before that, there was no such thing as punctuated equilibrium, which is what they call it now, which any kid could figure out as the way the fucking world works. The slow erosion happens on the side of the bank, but sometimes there's a big flood that carves a big chunk of it. I mean, this is no-brainer shit. And the life moves at a steady pace normally, and every now and again something catastrophic happens. So my point is that if they think that digging something up is going to change a paradigm that they're expected to maintain, they're not going to fucking dig it up. There's the kind of opposition that they face to overturning paradigms, like the Clovis first. Like when Flint was on here and he tried to play that one down. Not only were Clovis ruined from that, but one thing that almost never got mentioned was Clovis first was version 2 of this. Before that, it was the Folsom first. And many careers were proved by people that possibly the Americans were people before the Folsom culture. Then they found the Clovis. This isn't that's not some novel time of it was a scientific debate in the future. No. This is standard operating procedure. It's always fucking been done. So it's not a surprising thing that they're going to try to hide stuff. It's not a surprising
It's just human ego and control. It's humans always want to be the experts, and they always want to be the one to control the information. If the information that's new that's coming out counters their control and their expertise, they reject it. It's just ego. It's just ego.
It's just kind of messed up because, I know scientists are people, but
It should all be what we know now. This is what we know now. When new information comes along, okay, now we're thinking about it in a different way. But the problem is they publish books.
yeah.
And these books, they definitively give dates. We now know, we are sure that this. What are your thoughts on the dating of the pyramids, and how do they date the pyramids? They date the pyramids based on whatever carbon that they could find in between the stones. Obviously, you can't carbon date stones themselves. So you have to use some sort of organic material that's around them.
The best dating is that the Great Pyramid is somewhere around 4,500 years ago. That was from organic material taken argue that the casing stones were restored because even the Romans restored parts of the Sphinx. I don't know how old the Great Pyramid is, but if it was constructed 4,500 years ago, then our understanding of what was happening in the Giza Plateau at that time is vastly different than the people that were. If you look at any academic textbook, they show people wearing loincloths and barefoot constructing the pyramid, and
Well, even hieroglyphs that depict moving statues.
Right.
It's a bunch of guys with sand